Welcome to the regular December meeting of the Concord Zoning Board of Adjustment. We will, for the most part, follow our usual procedure, which is to say we will call the cases in the order in which they appear on the agenda. We will ask the appellant to come forward and be sworn in and be seated in the chairs to my right and to offer us whatever testimony he or she would like us to hear. We ask that the appellants confine their testimony, if at all possible, to a 10-minute interval. Following that, we will solicit testimony from anyone in the audience who wishes to be heard in favor of the appeal and anyone in the audience who wishes to be heard in opposition to the appeal. And we ask that those people confine their testimony to 5 minutes. We will then next check with code enforcement to see if there's any comment from their office, and if any information has come forth that appears to bear factual clarification, the appellant will have the opportunity to offer that clarification, not new arguments, prior to our closing the public testimony portion of the hearing. Under most circumstances, the board will act on each case before moving on to the next one. We do, however, have a couple of matters before us which don't follow that pattern. They are requests for rehearing. Under most circumstances, and I think that'll be true in this case, we do not hear testimony during requests for rehearings. Rather, we consider what has been submitted to us in writing. And the first of the requests for rehearing is case 0080, 2023, 7 Break-A-Day, GWP Gateway Performance District. We have two requests for rehearings here. One from Cassie Cameron, who requests a rehearing on the issue of timeliness. The board found that her application was not timely. And another from John G. Cronin, requesting a rehearing on the issue of standing. We did find that the appellant at that time did have standing. So I assume you all had a chance to read the information that was submitted by, why don't we start with 0118, Cassie Cameron's appeal from her attorney. What do you think, Andrew?
Yeah, and frankly, I'm speaking as to both, but specifically with regard to Ms. Cameron's request, it was very thoroughly briefed, and I did look at the cases, but I don't think there was anything new in terms of what we had considered. I think, I didn't see anything new.
Okay. I should point out for the audience that the criteria for granting a rehearing are that the board needs to find that either we made an error in procedure, or we made an error in law, or the third piece of evidence that could change our minds would be that a new piece of information has come forward that was not available at the time that we had the hearing, which is germane to our decision. Inspector Morgan.
I would not grant rehearing. I don't believe the board erred.
Now, are you talking about both, or?
Oh, no, I would grant the rehearing for the standing one.
Okay.
I have no comment.
Okay.
I concur with
I agree with my colleagues. I saw nothing that would justify a rehearing on the issue of timeliness for Ms. Cameron. Would anyone care to make a motion?
Move that we deny the motion for rehearing.
Is there a second?
A second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? The vote is unanimous. The board will not rehear that case on the basis of timeliness. Now, the next question had to do with the question of standing. Why don't I start with Ms. Spector Morgan? She appears to have given some thought and have some thoughts to offer.
I believed at the time, and I believe now, that the applicant has no standing. She is no differently aggrieved than any other member of the public, and you need to show a personal aggrievement in order to be entitled to appeal an administrative decision. I think the mere fact that she drives through that intersection is nowhere near enough to give her standing. So I would vote to reconsider that decision.
I would concur.
I wouldn't concur.
Andrew?
I also do not concur. I do think, Inspector Morgan spoke very strongly and makes a lot of good points, but I didn't really see anything new that would impact the decision we made. The decision we made is what we made, so I'm not inclined to reconsider.
I'm inclined to agree with you. I did not vote in favor of granting standing in that case for the exact same reasons that Ms. Becker Morgan just cited. But I don't see a justification here for a rehearing per se. I think we acted, we decided. I didn't agree with the decision, but gee, that's never happened before. And I don't see a reason to take it up again. Would anyone care to make a motion in either direction for or against the request?
Move to deny.
Is there a second? Is there a discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
Nay.
The vote is 4-1. Ms. Becker Morgan in the minority. We have elected to not grant a rehearing on the matter of 0119 concerning standing for, and all of this related to 7 break a day
That's true.
out on the out far end of Loudon Road. That brings us to our first hearings this evening. However, there's a couple of items that I ought to bring to your attention before we get started. And they have to do with three cases that are before us this evening. One is a discussion that I want to have with the board, and the other two have to do with the discussion we need to have with the appellants. The first case is 0122, 89 North State Street, Civic Performance District. One of our board members is not going to be able to sit on that case due to a conflict of interest. We will only have a 4-member board. So my question to the appellant is, are you willing to have your case heard by a 4-member board? If you are heard by a 4-member board, you still have to have 3 votes in favor of any motion, and the fact that you were not heard by a 4-member board is not a reason to request a rehearing. You do have a right to be heard by a 5-member board. Unfortunately, this evening we can't do it, which means we would defer your case until the next meeting. Is there someone here from 89 State Street or State Street who could speak? Yes, sir.
Let me speak from here.
There's fine.
My name is Derek Gordon. I'm an attorney for Concord CCC, the applicant, and we would prefer to defer for the next hearing.
Very good. All right. What I think we should do then is to open and recess this hearing to the next, this case to the next hearing. Do I have a motion to do that?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
Abstain.
Okay, abstain. The vote is unanimous, 4 votes, 1 abstention. We will see you in January. You're welcome. The same question I need to pose to the appellant at 41 Bradley Street in the RN Neighborhood District. One of our board members needs to recuse himself due to a conflict of interest, and that means that you would be heard by a 4-member board, same story as the previous case. Yes, sir.
I would love for you to hear my case tonight.
We will do that then.
Indeed.
Very good. The next item of discussion before we get down to the actual hearings, I love a good roll-up, is 10 River Road. We have a case here, this is case 0108, excuse me, 30 River Road, I'm sorry, I misspoke, RM Medium Residential District. And we have a request to be exempted from the 100-year floodplain requirement. And we have also been informed that there is an additional request associated with that property having to do with a modification of the building, which is not included in the original request. So my question to the board is, do we want, in the interest of efficiency and getting a good global understanding of what's going on, to defer this case until next month in favor of hearing both matters at once?
I would be fine with that, provided the applicant agrees, given our 45-day timeline.
Okay. Andrew, how do you feel about it?
So just to make sure I understand, we can't hear the equitable waiver tonight because the notice wasn't given? Is that?
No, we can hear the equitable waiver.
On project. No. This is 30 River Road.
Yeah, 30 River.
It's not an equitable waiver.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's variance for a floodplain elevation.
Oh, right, I'm sorry. Right.
we can hear that, and we can hear it based on the information that was submitted in the application. What it means is we're going to be visiting with the same people on the same piece of property for something else next month. So the question is, do we want to do that? We can do it.
Right, so they have a second application.
Yes, which I have not seen yet.
Okay, got it.
Ms. Hutton's told us about.
If the applicant agrees, it would seem to be economical to delay.
Okay.
I agree.
Is the applicant here? Appellant? Yes, sir. You want to be heard tonight?
Ideally, yes, and we think the two issues are unrelated.
All right.
The second application that's pending for January came up while this case was pending. We were on this one, I think we were trying to get in last month, and some inspections were done, and there's a front stoop that was built by a prior builder without a permit. So that's going to rise and fall on a different set of circumstances. Tonight, what we're talking about is the floodplain, and this building is sitting idle. It's empty.
Okay. If you're willing to be heard tonight, you're not next on the agenda, but we will be visiting with you later. Thank you very much.
Well, they do have a right to go forward, right? So we.
And they will. So that brings us to our first case on the regular agenda, which is 0127 5 Short Street, RD, Downtown Residential District. Mark Beauregard is the owner. The applicant seeks a variance to Article 2841H, Table of Dimensional Regulations, to allow for 75% lot coverage instead of 60% permitted. Swear to tell the truth and nothing but the truth.
Yes.
Good evening. May we have your names for the record, please?
Mark Beauregard.
I just want to see the report.
Janet Lee.
Can't find it.
Good evening, Ms. Levy. And Mr. Beauregard. What would you like us to know?
I'm trying to put in a driveway at 5 Short Street to alleviate parking on a pretty narrow street. I got a variance last month for putting a driveway in up to within 1 foot of the property line, and I didn't realize that I also need a variance because it's going to be a paved driveway that has to be, the ordinance is that it has to be under 60% impermeable, and this would, putting this driveway in as planned would bring it up to 75%. This part of the city is, in my opinion, kind of grandfathered in. It's the historic portion of the city. If you look at page 2 on the packet that I submitted, it shows how that lot doesn't configure to any of the ordinances that are in place today. If you look at page 1, 2, 3, 4, I've got highlighted. I don't know if your copies are highlighted. You probably just printed them off. But every property that has an X anywhere near me on the surrounding blocks also don't conform just because it's so tight and narrow that you can't possibly have adequate parking without encroaching on some of these ordinances.
This is the same, exactly the same proposal you brought to us last month, correct?
It is, but it's more tailored towards the impervious portion. But it is, yes, the same driveway.
Physically, what you were going to do before.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
So the hardship would be if I'm not granted variance, that I don't have any adequate place for people to park. This is a two-family building, and I've got to have some place for off-street parking for winter months. The street has a restriction that you can't park on the street between January 1st and March 15th, and then between 7 a.m. and 6 p.m. there's only a 2-hour maximum allowed ability to park on that street.
Questions from the board?
Mine's for code. If you were to do gravel instead of paving, would we have the same issues? Gravel counts as, okay.
Yep. I'm trying to conform with everything else that's around that part of the city. I don't want to have the only gravel driveway. Currently, it's used as a parking area. It's unpaved. It's more grassy and muddy, and it's trailing everything out into the road. It's not real bad, but it's not pleasant.
Remind me, how many units is the structure?
2.
So each unit gets one spot right now? Or?
So there's a 1-bedroom upstairs. I would plan for that unit to have 1 parking spot, and the downstairs would have 2 parking spots stacked.
And I assume the structure, do you know how old the structure is?
It's built in 1880.
Other questions? Is there anything else you'd like us to know?
I think that covers it.
The 5 points, if you'd like us to state them for you.
Fire away.
Fire away.
Go ahead.
So the special hardship is an unusual lot. It's in a small lot. The only way we could have parking would be if we paved it and provided a certain area. The release thought asked for is the minimum necessary to have, we're asking for the minimum amount of parking that we can do. We're not asking for excessive parking. The authorization would not be against the public interest. Essentially, there is no parking on the street, and there is a curb cut there now, and we are actually parking there for both tenants. We feel that substantial justice is done since this is an existing parking, and we're only looking to come in and actually pave the parking area. And the parking area will have be done with good engineering.
Don't doubt it.
I know.
Any other questions?
It won't diminish surrounding property values, right?
It will not.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone who would like to be heard in favor of this appeal? Is there anyone who'd like to be heard in opposition to it? Please come forward. I swear you went. Tell the truth and nothing but the truth. Would you also jot down your name for the record on that sign-in sheet, as well as announcing it for the benefit of all present?
My name is Roy Schweiker. I'm not in the neighborhood. I'm more interested in this from an environmental standpoint. My understanding is there is a product called pervious pavement that might solve both of their issues of having a hard surface that doesn't shed, but at the same time, not letting the water contribute to the drainage issues in the city. So I would like to ask the board, rather than accepting this, what's the word I want? Postpone a decision and ask them to come back with, and they find some form of permeable pavement that will allow them to do this without having a hard surface.
Very good. Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who'd like to be heard? Any comments from code enforcement?
Not at this time.
With that, we'll declare the public testimony portion of the hearing closed.
Actually, before we do that, could we hear from the applicant about whether permeable is
Sure,
an option?
of course.
I do agree that that is an option. I am trying to do this under budget due to the expense and maintenance of doing that type of a driveway. It would be more cost effective for me, obviously, if we just paved it quick and easy. And again, it would conform to all of the properties that are in the surrounding areas. I understand his concern. If you look at the property to the east and west of mine, they're almost 100% impervious. Me adding a driveway, it doesn't help that situation, I understand, but it's kind of the nature of the beast in that section of the city to be able to put adequate parking within form. This is what I'm trying to say.
Technically, let me do a technical on it. I have actually designed pervious parking lots, and by nature, they actually drain into the ground, and you have to have a substantial area for them to drain to, and you're still draining something off. It's not like water's going to just magically disappear and go in the ground. Most likely, this is not one of the areas The only pervious parking lot, I believe, in the city of Concord is White's Park. And that essentially drains into the pond. And the only reason it was done that is that we didn't want, as a member of Friends of White's Park, we did not want catch basins there connecting. But that has a substantial filtering system underneath it. This would not be an appropriate location for a pervious parking lot.
Thank you very much. We're talking the lot coverage that's allowed is building and pavement of 60%, correct? It's all impervious surface?
All impervious surface, right, but it doesn't specifically call out gravel or any of those things that would be partially pervious.
Right, right.
Do you happen to know, Doctor, what he was talking about with this pervious? Is that similar to gravel? I mean, would it count, although they call it pervious, would it count as
I've
pervious?
never had that discussion with the engineering department, so I don't know what calculations they use to determine how pervious a particular surface is.
Well, and the overage is 15% of the total that they're allowed. It's not 100%. Now that's 15%. That amounts to 15% of both the coverage of the building and the pavement, so it's more than 15% of the pavement. But how much we can't know, but it's less than 100% of the pavement. Glad I cleared that up.
That was a lot of math you just did in your head.
Glad I cleared that up. All right. Discussion. Let's start with Mr. Wallner on the subject of lot coverage.
Well, the characteristics of the neighborhood are such that these are small lots. We also heard testimony, and I recall testimony, I just read my minutes, testimony from last month that most of the homes in that area have paved lots. So I think reasonable use of that property would also include having the right to have a paved lot.
Very good. Mr. Evans.
I agree with my colleague to my left.
Ms. Morgan.
I believe that, I would move to grant it. I believe that the spirit of the ordinance and the public interest are met because this would not alter the essential character of the neighborhood given the other paved parking areas. The lot does appear to be smaller than others in the neighborhood, making it somewhat unique and harder to meet the maximum pervious surface. There's no gain to the public from the denial, and it won't diminish surrounding property values. And given what we've heard about pervious pavement not being an option here, I think we should grant the variance.
Mr. Winters.
I agree, and I just add that, as we said, it's a small lot with a relatively larger structure that long predates the code and long predates the parking need. So we may not allow a building like this if this was brought as an empty parcel, but since the building is there and it's a reasonable use of the building, it therefore is also a reasonable use to have parking for the people in the building when there's very little street parking.
I agree with my colleagues. Would anyone care to make a motion?
I move that we grant the variance for the reasons previously articulated.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? The vote is unanimous. The variance is granted. You're welcome. That brings us to the next case on our agenda, which is 30 River Road, RM, Medium Density Residential District. For 30 River Road Properties LLC is the owner. The applicant seeks to renovate an existing single-family dwelling that resides in the 100-year floodplain and seeks a variance to Article 28.3.2J, substantial improvements to existing residential structures within the 100 and 500-year floodplain. Gentlemen, may I swear you in? Swear to tell the truth, nothing but.
I do.
Aside from signing in, if you would identify yourselves for the record, that would be helpful to us. Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is John Cronin. I'm an attorney from Manchester and representing the applicant, Mr. Faria, who's with us in the audience this evening. Also with me is Mr. Peter Grenier, who's been involved in this property for probably longer than he wished he was, but he's been involved in it, and I'll kind of lay out the groundwork for you. As stated in the staff report, in 21, a gentleman by the name of Mr. Robleski purchased the property. the long existing property. It's what they call a pre-firm property because it was initially constructed prior to the adoption of the FEMA wetlands ordinance. And your wetland ordinance is modeled after FEMA, and I believe it's part of the National Insurance Flood Program, where they set out building specifics and various things. Mr. Roleski went in and pulled a permit. It was issued. He commenced work, incurred expense, and started doing some repairs. We will admit tonight some of those repairs are probably not appropriate. One was a stoop, which is the subject matter of another hearing next month, and also did some work to the driveway, which we note from the abutters paperwork is a concern. That gentleman worked on the property for close to 2 years. Had lost his primary contract with Lowe's, where he was an installer for some of their products and couldn't finish the work. Mr. Grenier had held a mortgage on it. I went to Mr. Grenier, said he couldn't finish. Mr. Feria, who was known to Mr. Grenier and worked with him doing a lot of framing for projects, was interested in a project, and he introduced him to the site. Mr. Feria acquired the property. They went out with Terrio to the site, looked at it, and wanted to proceed under the original building permit. The discussion at that time was they're not assignable, you'll have to reapply, but it shouldn't be a problem. The permit was actually, I think, posted but never paid for and withdrawn prior to the time it became issued, as Ms. Hutton discovered some concerns with the wetland ordinance. Once that surfaced, we started looking at the FEMA desk reference and some of the ways that you can work around these problems. The building has been long existing. It's going to be there in its current state, or it's going to be there as it's improved. And the goal of the FEMA and your wetland ordinance is to basically prevent government impact and insurance impact for buildings that are close to waterways that will rise up through hydrostatic pressure and float away, causing navigation hazards and causing losses to the insurance program. Also to minimize the impacts of flooding, human safety, property damage, and so forth. This particular property in its existing state, the floor area, the first floor living area, is about 1.5 inches above the base elevation. I believe the city has taken it and set 2 feet above that as a base standard, but 1.5 above the flood elevation. Mr. Grenier, after this surfaces, well, I can address that. I can add some height to the floor and bring it up above the base elevation, which he's willing to do. But then you get into the discussion about basement, where it gets a little bit confusing. The ordinance and FEMA talk about basement being an enclosed structure. In this building, there's about a 3.5 to 4 foot crawl space. It has a concrete floor and filled with gravel. That's a sealed structure. It's waterproofed on the outside up to the grade. It can be waterproofed all the way up to the top of the foundation and the sill. One of the thoughts that Mr. Grenier had, and one of the conditions that we'll be talking about, is that he will either fill that 4-foot crawl space in entirely and remove the bulkhead. I say that with the note that in section 3.3 of the FEMA desk reference, they talk about structures that are used for storage of vehicles and other things, but not living space, being adequate. This is never going to be a living space. It's too short. It's basically storage. And there's no mechanicals down there. My understanding from looking at the history of FEMA, the reason why they talk about basements, it's pretty typical for people to have their boiler and their furnace and hot water tanks at the basement level. And FEMA and the insurance folks don't want that to get damaged by water, with good reason. That was removed from the basement before and is above the floodplain now, so that's not an issue. So when I look at it in the umbrella of all of these different pieces and apply it to the criteria, I'll start with your special criteria for the floodplain first. The level of flooding is not going to be increased by this at all. The building has been there. It is there. The stoop is outward facing from the water. So that's going to exist the way that it is. When you talk about the minimum necessary to try and achieve it, I don't know how directly applicable it is, because if the floor is raised up, and it's raised up to 2 inches, it will take that whole living area out of the floodplain, and even begs the question whether maybe a variance is required. again, this is a little bit of an unusual circumstance for us, for Pete, and for everybody, so we're trying to do a win-win. When you look at the substantial improvement piece, the way they do it is 50% of the value of the building. Pete, his team believe any building that's sitting out there is worth a lot of money today, particularly in proximity to a river. Unfortunately, the assessor has it in at about $84,000, something of that nature. Call it 100 for argument. So that would limit your renovation to 50,000. I don't think anyone, and even our meeting with staff and city council, wants to see a building where we paint the floors and do the bare minimum to make it habitable, when you can do a little bit extra to make it a really nice building. And I think you have some pictures that were filed with the staff report from the abutter that shows this particular property. So addressing the 5 criteria, the intent of the ordinance, spirit and intent, certainly the spirit and intent of these provisions is to prevent flood impacts and to prevent damage and to prevent navigational hazards and risks to people outside the property line by the release of hydrostatic pressure. One of the ways we can demonstrate that is the essential character of the neighborhood is going to change. It's really not. I mean, there's going to be a single-family house there, whether it's an old one as it sat beforehand or a nicely improved one, be suitable, a great house for a family. Really not going to change the essential character of the neighborhood. That's also getting the public interest prong as well. Same standard under Farrar versus Keene. Substantial justice, you have a building that's there. I know ignorance of the law is no excuse, they generally say, but the circumstances here, the city had issued a permit to do the work, oversight, mistake. People looked at it in good faith and acquired the property with the intent to finish it. So they get stuck here in a Pandora's box where they've been delayed for months and at great expense for it. The balancing test, the harm to the public, if this stands as a structure with $50,000 of renovation, or it's done in a nice way and upgraded and the floor is lifted above the base elevation, it shouldn't cause any harm to anyone in the public. I know the abutter has some concerns, and certainly they have the right to raise them, but the standard is the general public and not the abutter. For the value prong, we went out and talked to Mr. McKean. He's a licensed appraiser. I believe that should be in your packets from last month. He went out and looked at the property, the surrounding neighborhood, and concluded that if the variances were granted, it would not diminish the value of surrounding property values. You get to the hardship piece, and there's 2 sides to that. The first one, fair and substantial relationship, the ordinance to this property. Generally there is, and the floodplain ordinance is a good thing, and it's there for a reason. We don't dispute that. But if the conditions that I'm going to propose shortly are satisfied, we believe that there wouldn't be a fair and substantial relationship because we're taking away the risk of anything happening in the basement, right? It's basically unlivable. Mr. Rennie is willing to put the flappers in there, so it's no longer a concealed structure. And that's one of the items in FEMA. You can put these flappers that 1 inch per foot of square area, which allows water to pass through in the event of a flood, so the building doesn't rise up off the foundation and float down the river. Willing to do all those sorts of things. So we would believe that it's not fair and substantial relationship. The use is reasonable. They're taking a single-family house. They're making it better. I think even the abutter says in his remarks that it's the nicest it's looked in 10 years. And granted, it's not finished, but when it is finished, it will be a nice property. So we believe we meet those criteria. If you can look favorably on this request, we're happy to accept the conditions. We don't think it's necessary, but if you want that 2-3 feet of area filled in with gravel, we're going to have it as a condition. Willing to put FEMA compliant flappers on the foundation to relieve any hydrostatic pressure and to increase the floor area to above the base elevation. And also on the exterior, we're not seeking a variance for this, but the abutter did raise a concern about the driveway being overbuilt and widened by Mr. Robleski, and we believe that's true. Mr. Grenier will restore all those exterior improvements back to their original state, bring the driveway back to where it was and do the plantings, so they're back where they were. So we believe that we meet the criteria. It's an unfortunate situation. We appreciate all the help that Ms. Hutton has given us and trying to help us navigate these various rules and restrictions. But I think granting the variance is a best case scenario because it already exists. If it were a new building, I would expect you to say, no, we don't want a building in that area. But we have the building there. It's been there for a long time. And going forward and finishing this is going to make it better for everyone.
Questions from the board? Yes.
The crawl space exists and has existed the whole time?
Yes.
Okay. And you also mentioned you'd be willing to waterproof the rest of it up to the top?
Yeah, you know, like when you drive by some of these, you'll see that the waterproofing goes up to where the grade, but not up to the top.
Right.
That's done
So
up
do
to
you
the
do it to the
grade.
top?
He will increase it and extend it up to the top.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Can you just, one reference I didn't exactly follow, the 50% rule, what is that rule of requirement for?
That's in your ordinance. That's what we're really seeking relief from. And that's to limit substantial renovation of a structure in the floodplain.
Oh, so your reference to that was sort of thinking you might not need a variance at all.
Well, if we had a debate over what the real value of the building is as it sits, assessors have a difficult job. They do mass appraisal. I don't think it's under 100,000. If we were able to prove, and Ms. Hutton has given us the opportunity to go out and get appraisals and things, but even if we got it to 200, right, then your budget's limited 100. That's really not enough to do a good job. And after a lot of humming and hawing and sitting idle, we thought the best course would be to come to try and get the variance first. If we don't get it, then we're going to have to go back and have a look at this.
So the ordinance says if it's less than 50% of the fair market or however value is determined, then you don't need a variance.
That's correct.
Okay. And then my other question was, and maybe you did address this, but so I didn't quite catch it. As you know, the neighbors have mentioned that the footprint of the house has increased and the total floor space has increased substantially. Is that true?
I believe that it is. So we weren't aware of it. It was brought to our attention prior to the last meeting, and one of the reasons it was continued was so we could verify that. Mr. Grenier went out, I believe Ms. Hutton or Dario went out and looked at it. We got a sketch. It's about 5 feet. There's a covered stoop at the front, and the prior builder closed that in and made it living area. Shouldn't have done it, right? Should have got a permit for it.
And that's next month?
That's next month.
Oh, so do you know, did they pour more foundation or they just
No, they're on a footing.
Oh, they're on a footing.
So that floor area there would still be 1.5 inches below, and to the extent that you allow that to remain next month, we would increase the level of that as well to get it above the base flood elevation.
Other questions? Yes.
Can you explain that a little bit when you say raise the floor? How would you do that? Are you just talking about building it up?
Yes.
2 layers of plywood.
Now, I understood that the height that the city requires is higher than that, though?
It's 1 foot above base, it's 1 foot above the base flood elevation, so they'd have to come their 1.5 inches plus another inch, if they're going to be compliant.
So that would get them to 1 foot,
Yes.
not to base flood.
But that still leaves the issue of the basement, because the ordinance is the basement, the floor of the basement has to be 1 foot above.
Understood, yeah, okay. It's clear to me now, thank you.
Okay.
Other questions?
Just a practical question. If you fill the crawl space with gravel, what happens between that and the floor system?
If you put the flappers in, and we do this over in the Seacoast, Rye, and Seabrook with those houses, anything new there that's being built, they call them flappers. They almost look like your dryer vent.
Yeah, familiar with
A
it.
little bit bigger and they're a little bit more mechanical. So if the water comes to flood level, say your foundation wall is 4 feet high, say the flood comes up to 3 feet, it flows through the flappers and goes out, and they won't get hydrostatic pressure to lift the building off the foundation. Now, I know this building has been here for a long time. There's been a lot of storms and a lot of water this spring and summer there. We had a period where we were ready to build the ark, and it hasn't floated away. So I think the odds of that happening, even without the flappers is slim and none, but we'll do it.
So I'm confused though. If you say you're going to put gravel into that 4-foot crawl space, then the flappers are going to be above that?
No.
Or
The
it would be
water will
an
flow-
option? So you,
Yeah, we'd prefer not to put the gravel and just leave the 3-foot open space for the water to travel through. But if the basement is a technicality, that's a problem. The thought is if we fill it in, it makes the basement go away. It's kind of a workaround. I don't know that it's that practical, but if it gets us around the technical definition of basement. And I think there's an argument to be made, in fairness to Ms. Hutton, we haven't raised this and it came up preparing for this hearing. They talk about the basement definition being an enclosed structure. I think once you put the flappers in, it no longer becomes fully enclosed. It's open for the water to pass through. So that might be a red herring, but we're willing to do it.
so what would the purpose then be of waterproofing the section above the grade?
Well, it's a good point. The ordinance says either or, that you can either do the flappers or do the waterproofing. Because we're begging for mercy, we're offering to do both.
Other questions? All set? Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Is there anyone here who wishes to be heard in favor of this appeal? Is there anyone here who wishes to be heard in opposition to it? Please step forward.
I'm on my own.
All right.
Hi.
Swear to tell the truth and nothing but.
Yes, I do.
May we, oh, you're not on your own.
Sorry.
You swear to the same thing?
Yeah.
Very good. Would you identify yourselves for the record, please, and also jot your names down on that?
David
sheet.
Belser, I'm butter owner.
Dave Belser?
Dave Belser, yeah.
And Roseanne Bobage, also a butter.
What would you like us to know? Well, and your last name, ma'am?
Beau Rivage.
Oh, Bo.
Up with that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a nice
He
river.
just needs it phonetically.
Beautiful river view, yes. Lower Village.
You also submitted a letter.
Yes.
Yeah, we submitted a lot of stuff, and it appears that you've had the opportunity to have reviewed it. I hope it was useful. This is interesting. I don't really have anything, an axe to grind here. But this project has been a thorn in our side since it started. And it was December 2020? It was more than 3 years. 2019. December 2019, I believe that Mr. Grenier originally bought the property, sold it a few weeks later to Robleski. Robleski claimed that he was going to live there the rest of his life. He was going to develop the property. He proceeded to run his business out of the property for 2.5 years and not actually live there. He had a wanton disregard for bringing things appropriately before the board to get proper permits to engage the neighbors when he improved a right-of-way across the neighbor's property. If you want me to elaborate on any of that, I'd be happy to.
No need.
So basically, that happened, and I'm not sure why the property went back to Mr. Grenier, why he bought it back from Mr. Robleski, but all of the violations, all of the work that should have been done properly appears to have been done improperly under Mr. Robleski, and now Mr. Grenier wants to proceed saying, hey, I'm not the one who's responsible for this. That's basically our appearance, and the appearance to us. And even tonight, learning that there's going to be another meeting about the additional footprint. The amount of additional footprint that he represented having added is incorrect. He stated that there was like 5 feet added on the back that had been existing porch, and that is simply not true. Mr. Robleski added, brand new piers, framing, there is the foundation. It's an addition to the foundation. We could go there and we could measure from the foundation to the edge of the current house, and it's at least 7, possibly 10 feet. It's a significantly more amount. It wasn't a porch that got built out. Okay? It was a flat-out addition to the house. The other improvements to the floor space inside, take a three-season porch, converted it completely interior. In the process, removed the whole front of the existing house as it had stood when the property was originally sold in December of 2019. There have been major substantial improvements. Basically, a complete rebuild of the house went on for several years, and now you're being asked to say, hey, if I'd gotten the right permit the first time, maybe it would have been better, or I would have gotten the right variance the first time. And, I don't know what a good solution is. But it's, there's a lot of things that are just not kosher about this project.
Any questions from the board?
I hear your frustration, but our focus tonight is on the basement. Do you agree that that basement has always been there? It's not new?
Well, it was put in by me in, I don't know the exact year.
1990.
1990 something.
Okay.
The house was jacked up. Yeah.
Okay, you did it in 1990.
The
It's a crawl
basement also has needed a working sump pump.
Continuously. So yeah, there's
Forever.
water in the basement. That improvement was making the house sound, solid foundation, at the time, and it required coming to this very board and asking for the property, the opportunity to do it.
Thank you.
Additionally, at that time frame, I was actually interested in doing major substantial improvements, basically building a new house down there. And, I came before the board and found out, what would be required. And it was just flat out denied because they didn't want a bigger house, more substantial house being built there. And this house is significantly more substantial than what was standing there 3 years ago. The house that exists now, today.
Very good. Any other questions? Thank you very much.
And also, there is the fact that there are properties that have undergone similar major renovations. There's even brand new properties that have happened that have abided by the rules and done the right thing. If Mr. Grenier is going to remedy the driveway situation, I'd like to have that detailed for being okay with it.
Does the right of way run over your property?
The right-of-way is split between us and another neighbor. The whole lot that this house is on, it's actually 3 separate lots. The first lot is a 75 by 75 lot that is not buildable. That's been completely paved with hardback. And that's.
That one up there?
This doesn't show the 3.
Look, so this is actually not. If you pull up the plot that he had, this is actually so starting here on the river, there's 75 feet by 150 with a little point on it. That is this lot right here. That is deeded as an unbuildable lot. This is another right of way for this house to get to the river. This is a 100 by 100 lot. So it's basically 3 lots. The only usable lot is 150 by 150 right here. It has a right of way which comes through here. I don't know. There has to be a right of way for this house to cross this middle lot somehow. That's somewhere in deed for somebody. The other thing is that I did provide a map where it shows that the floodplain, the 100-year line, comes through here. There's a significant portion of this lot that's actually in floodway, not floodplain. All of the lot is in the floodplain. Other people have done the right thing, we've renovated, made, camps, all of these were originally camps, have made them into quite nice places, jacking them up, allowing water to pass underneath them, etc. So,
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who'd like to be heard? Any comment from code enforcement?
Couple of things. In past discussions with applicant's counsel, we made it clear that if the floodproofing is added to the basement, if the flowers are put in, we're going to need certification from a structural engineer that the basement isn't compromised, that the structural integrity of the basement is compromised. And we would also need certification from P that is sufficient to floodproof the structure. So I just want to make sure that if you impose a condition, that the applicant is aware of the further requirements that that's going to impose on them in terms of expense. Other than that, I think that you have what you need.
Thank you very much. Mr. Cronin, would you like to offer any factual clarification?
No, not really. I think that the abutter was candid and said when he owned it, which realized he did at one point in time, he'd done the foundation, but I think his concerns about the right-of-way and the driveway are valid. The liberties were taken there. However you think we should do it, I talked to Mr. Grenier and said, could you do a drawing to show it, meet with him and see if he's satisfied, make sure that Ms. Hutton is okay with it. So if it's some condition that it's modified to the satisfaction or the reasonable satisfaction of the abutter and staff, we would work to make that right.
Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
That would declare the public testimony portion of the hearing closed. We have a request to grant a variance concerning the height of the floor of the basement for 30 River Road. We have testimony that the basement is not habitable and that it has nothing of value in it, and that it would be, the owner is willing to reconfigure it to floodproof it, or at least to eliminate the opportunity or the liability that it may pose downstream in the event that there's a flood. We also heard testimony from the neighbors that they've been frustrated with the progress of this project. I'm going to start with Mr. Winters.
So it's wrapping my head a little bit about around the legal analysis or the analysis of the code. So I'm kind of just talking out loud here. Maybe as we go around, you guys can address some of these questions. But they need a variance to, quote, substantially improve it without elevating the basement. But then they're saying they will elevate the basement.
No, they're going to elevate
They
the
can't
first
elevate the
floor.
basement. They're saying they'll elevate the floor as a substitute.
The first floor, yep.
So I'm kind of pondering. My general thought, and I do have sympathy for both the applicant and the abutter, because it sounds like the applicant kind of got caught holding the bag by this other guy who was doing a lot of unsupervised, improper work, and then couldn't pay, and is not involved anymore. But it strikes me as concerning that it seems like the abutter has more knowledge about the project than the applicant does, and it doesn't seem like the plan is very specific. There's a disagreement over even how much floor space is being added. So really, the extent of the substantial improvement isn't really crystal clear to me. I'm getting sort of different takes on that, and frankly, the abutter is a lot more specific about it, which not I think anyone is misrepresenting intentionally, but it seems like the abutter's information is more specific. So I would tend to be inclined in general to approve a variance for a substantial improvement, but I'm having a really hard time with this one because I just think that the details are really unclear right now.
Nick, how do you see it?
Well, anytime we have a property that has substantial improvements, we seem to look favorably on that, but it's a pretty complicated situation. I too am somewhat inclined to lead in favor of approving it, but I'm
Dr. Moore?
I am entirely in favor of granting it with a lot of conditions, and I'll be happy to make a motion when the time comes if you like.
Mr. Evans?
I would have to agree. The problem I see is that the abutters are asking us to deny the variance, which would cause the owner to spend less money to renovate this, and I can't see how that benefits the surrounding neighborhood to have a less glamorous dwelling there than one that would, the neighborhood would benefit by having a nicer property there than one that is not so nice. In other words, if the money equals niceness, why would we deny the variance and have the property be less desirable looking or less desirable to the abutters? That's what I'm not clear on. So I think the variance should be granted. Certain conditions.
Yes. I'm inclined to agree that it should be granted. I think the question that specifically has been put to us doesn't address expansion of the building per se in this case. There may be an issue there. I don't know. That's something that Dr. Hutton would have to help us out with in the future if they've expanded the thing and created and created a violation that of the zoning in that regard. But we're not being asked to forgive that at this point. We're just being asked to deal with the basement. And I think in this case, certainly they do have a hardship in that the basement is an existing condition. You got to have a basement if you're going to hold, or something to hold up the house. The fact that there's going to be, that the hazards are going to be mitigated under the conditions takes care of the intent of the ordinance, I think, in this case, which is not to have things floating down the river and bumping into other things that are there. So, didn't pay any attention. Excuse me. Go to your room. So I'm inclined to grant for all of those reasons. Would anyone care to make a motion?
I will.
Please do.
I move that we grant the requested variance because there are special conditions of the property given that the house exists and the crawl space was installed prior to the adoption of the floodplain ordinance. There is no alteration to the character of the neighborhood from allowing the house to continue with the basement. There's no gain to the public from the denial, and the loss to the applicant is potentially very huge, especially since the city issued the building permit, and there'll be no diminution surrounding property values. In addition, it will not result in an increase in flood heights or additional threats to public safety or extraordinary public expense. It will not result in increased flood levels during the base flood discharge, and it is the minimum necessary considering the flood hazard. The conditions of approval that I would impose are: 1, the first floor living space is to be raised so that it is above elevation. The basement is to be filled with gravel and flappers installed and waterproofed, the entire thing. And as part of that, we'll need certification from an engineer that does not affect the structural integrity of the house, and certification from a professional engineer that it actually results in the basement being floodproof. And although it's not related to the variance, but it was offered, I would also impose a condition of approval that the driveway be restored to its original state and plantings added, and that be done in consultation with the abutters and to Dr. Hutton's satisfaction.
Well, we're all on the act. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay. Chance to discuss. What's your thinking on the gravel in the basement?
They offered it. It seems to me to make some measure of sense to make it so that when it's filled, it's like heavier. But I'm not a water person or an engineer, and you guys are. So if that doesn't make any sense, then I'm perfectly happy to say bye-bye.
I don't think, as far as the question of the flood hazard, the gravel makes any difference.
Okay.
I think what they were talking about was essentially taking away its basement identity,
And removing any risk that it might become habitable space.
I suppose. But unless they have a family of hobbits move in there, I don't think there's much danger of that. So, and I can see a rationale for the water being able to move freely in and out, as opposed to being obstructed by gravel.
And I will withdraw that proposed condition.
That's the point of the flappers. Okay.
My
Is
second
that
still-
consistent with the second?
It is.
Any other discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Vote is unanimous. The variance is granted. And that brings us to case 0113, 2023, 315 South Main Street, Urban Transitional District. Jonathan and Jacqueline Ruggles, Revocable Trust, are the owners, and the applicant seeks a variance to sign permitted in residential districts to allow replacement of an existing sign with a new sign of 33.25 square feet versus 20 square feet allowed. I swear you all in? You swear to tell the truth and nothing? You know the drill with names and sign-ins and so on?
My name's Josh Messenger. I'm with Advantage Signs. I'm here with Connor O'Keefe and Tynan Flanagan of O'Keefe Flanagan Electric. What we're here for today is asking for a sign that's going to be 13 square feet larger than allowed. The reason for asking for this is that the existing sign that R&T Electric had on the property was the 33 square feet, and that's what's been there for 30 plus years.
Probably 40 plus.
Maybe 40 years. We understand that this part of South Main Street is on the more commercial side, and there's other buildings with similar size signs in the area that were done before the writing of the ordinance.
If you're just replacing a sign with a sign that's the same size, why do you need a variance?
Because the code was written for 20 square feet, and we're asking for 33.
If they're just replacing it with a sign that's the same size, why do they need a variance?
Because signs aren't given the same level of grandfathering as you would normally think. Literally, when you replace a sign, you have to make it conforming. Once you remove and replace the sign or a face, it has to be made conforming to the ordinance.
So even if it's just the
Keep them
text,
up.
even if it's just the text on the same size sign.
Reface the sign, it's removal of the sign, it has to meet the standards of the ordinance.
That's in the ordinance?
It is.
You're just correcting a typo.
All right. Do you have any other questions? Nope. Any questions, Mr. Winters?
I understand your point. Well, you're just kind of replacing it, but obviously it does still require the variance. Is there anything unique about the lot, like maybe the angle that the cars are coming from, or the height, or something?
It's an existing frame, and the bracket was made for that size sign, so it's not a unique lot, though, no.
Other questions? Thank you very much, gentlemen. Unless you have something else you want us to know. Thanks.
Thanks.
Is there anyone who'd like to be heard in favor of this appeal? Is there anyone who'd like to be heard in opposition to it? Any comments from code enforcement?
Not at this time.
Without declare the public testimony portion of the hearing closed, we have a request to replace a non-conforming sign with a new fully non-conforming sign, which, according to the ordinance, would require a variance. How does this look to you, Ms. Vick?
I disagree that it needs a variance, but since it needs one, I think that replacing the sign with an identical size sign will not alter the essential character of the neighborhood, and so the public interest and spirit of the ordinance will be met. There'll be no diminution surrounding property values. There is no gain to the public from denying the variance, and the unique special conditions of the property is that the sign already exists.
Second.
All right, we have Mr. Wallner's point of view. Mr. Evans, how does it look to you?
I agree.
And Mr. Winters?
I also agree.
we're all on the same page here. May I,
Move approval.
okay, moving approval of what she said.
Oh, yes, great. I forgot you did that already.
Yeah, well,
I don't think I moved, I just articulated.
yeah,
Well, the second stand.
been moved and seconded several times apparently. In any case, is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The vote is unanimous. The variance is granted. And that brings us to,
Sorry,
welcome, good night.
she was asking.
That brings us to case 0117, 92 Portsmouth Street, single family residential district. Selena and Ryan Blaine are the owners, and the applicants are looking to construct an addition along with a garage to the existing house and are seeking a variance to Article 2841H, Table of Dimensional Regulations, to allow an 11-foot setback versus 15-foot setback required for the northeast corner of the proposed garage. Tell the truth and nothing but. Would you jot your name down on the sign-in sheet? Okay, and we have it, please.
David Scott, representing the builder for Selena and Ryan.
What would you like us to know, Mr. Scott?
We are looking to construct a garage with an addition. The garage is a 24 by 24, and we'd like to position it on property. Due to the irregular shape of the property, the northeast corner does get into the 25-foot standard setback by 4 feet.
15-foot setback?
15 foot, sorry. A lot of projects.
Can you give us an idea of why, under the criteria for a variance, you think this ought to be granted?
It doesn't diminish the property. The closest abutter on that side is East Learning Center. Their building itself, I think, is 200 and something feet from that boundary line, so it doesn't diminish that. We did exhaust any other options. One was going to be to put the garage forward, but it would break the plane of the existing house, and really, aesthetically, it's not very appealing. We did actually go from a 32 24 deep garage to a 24 by 24. It still left it within that 4 foot, but it works for their needs, for future needs. It goes with the house. Aesthetically, it works.
And the addition's not in the setback, just the garage.
That's correct, yeah.
How wide is the garage?
24 by 24.
It's drawn as a rectangle here, as opposed to a square.
Mostly square.
Mostly square?
Oh, well, I'm sorry, square. So on that...
My geometry teacher would not have
Yeah,
said
yeah, yeah. That's my online handiwork with the city's program. There's actually a breezeway, an 8-foot breezeway in between. So I think what that did is it didn't push the breezeway the full.
So I was going to ask about that. So you.
Is it okay if I approach?
Yeah, of course.
So this here is technically from this point to here. I think it's drawn in as the 4 foot or less, but really it comes over here. It's 8 feet wide.
Why can't you make it 4 feet?
The breezeway.
It's a breezeway, and they're using it. As a family, they're using it as a place to dump all their equipment. And it's a mudroom, exactly.
And that exists.
No, only what's existing is just the existing house here. So we could make it a 4-foot breezeway, but it wouldn't be very usable. And my thought is on a safety aspect too, you're trying to exit through 4 feet, you're going down a hallway versus a nice wide area where we can put doors, windows, so on.
Could you just put the garage all the way against the house and then put the breezeway in the back and then you walk in through the back and to the side?
Not very practical. We could. There's a bunch of opportunities. We even looked at moving around to this side of the house, but the kitchen is right here. So going with what you said, we actually did that idea too. What if you did the garage and come through? It's really, as soon as you get a couple of vehicles, 24 by 24 is the minimum we'd want to do for easy passing. And again, this 11 feet, it's really this last 4 feet along here.
Could we see the big map and see how close the learning center is? What he was talking about?
Right there.
There you go.
Oh. Okay, thanks.
Other questions from the board? Is there anything else you'd like us to know?
That's pretty much sums it up.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone who'd like to be heard in favor of this appeal? Is there anyone who'd like to be heard in opposition? Any comments from code enforcement?
Nope.
With that, we'll close the public testimony portion of the hearing. We have a request to add a garage and an addition. The garage would be within the setback of approximately 4 feet, I believe, into the setback of 15 feet. How does this one look to you, Andrew?
Well, persuasive to me is the fact that he didn't mention it, but I'm pretty sure, because my kids went to that learning center, that that's heavily wooded back there. There's a lot of woods before.
Can we see the
Ariel?
aerial?
Sure.
So, and because there's the angle, it's the 4 feet quickly becomes compliant. So, I think having a breezeway with a standard sized garage is a reasonable use out in that area. And they obviously had really considered a lot of different options for the layout with what goes with the existing house. So, based on the existing house and the fact that the neighbor is so far away, surrounded by a lot of woods, I'd be inclined to grant it. Inspector?
I would neither be surprised nor upset if the board grants the variance, but I can't vote for it because the need for a variance arises out of a design choice, not a special condition of the property.
Mr. Evans?
Well, I don't see how I see how it meets all of the conditions except for possibly that hardship, and that's the only problem I would have with it. Other than, sure, there are other design conditions, but that's pretty typical construction. And really only talking about a corner of that garage, so I would be inclined to agree with it.
Mr. Wong?
Yeah, I think the hardship is the unusual characteristics of the lot layout, the fact that you have an angled lot line, not a typical, whereas a typical would be perpendicular. This one is not, and that's what I think creates a hardship in the lot design. So I'm inclined to support granting variance.
I think we're very close to the edge of whether or not it's the minimum variance, because I don't feel comfortable that I really understand the design layout of this building, and a lot of their case for putting it in the setback was the necessity of organizing the design the way they did. However, the impact of this variance is very, very slight. As all my colleagues have pointed out, it doesn't run the full width of the building. The neighborhood is not really affected. There's mostly just trees across the property line. So I think, under the circumstances, I would be inclined to be dragged wistfully into the aye column if there were a vote or a motion to approve.
So moved.
Is there a second?
A second.
Do you have enough information?
I do, thank you.
Is there any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
The vote is 4-1. Ms. Spector Morgan in the minority. The variance is granted. However, no architectural design awards are going to be dispensed. Okay, that brings us to 5 Pine Street. This is case number 0121. This is an old friend of ours, this property. The Neighborhood Residential District, Concord White Properties, 6 LLC owners. The owner requests an equitable waiver for frontage and parking as it pertains to the multifamily dwelling. If the equitable waiver is not approved, the applicant is requesting the Zoning Board of Adjustment reverse the zoning administrator's determination that the residential dwelling on the property contains 2 units and is not a legally existing multifamily dwelling. Gentlemen, swear to tell the truth and nothing but.
I do.
Would you identify yourselves for the record as you testify, please?
Daniel White.
I'm John Arnold from Warren Reno.
Carry on.
All right. So as you mentioned, I think you guys are fairly familiar with this property. It's 5 Pine Street. Thank you for pulling that up. This was a single-family dwelling that was built in the late 1800s. In 1984, the Seymour family owned the property. They sought to convert it from a single-family dwelling into 3 units. They did all this by the book. They hired a professional contractor. They got financing for the construction from an institutional lender, a New Hampshire savings bank, about $50,000 in 1984 dollars, and they went to the city and got a building permit. The building permit is specifically to convert the home to 3 units. You have a copy of that in your packet. So the Seymours got that building permit. They did extensive renovations, creating 3 separate units, one on each floor of the house. The renovations led to litigation between the Seymours, their contractor, and the lender, all the way up to the Supreme Court. The court records show that the city not only issued the building permit, but came out and did several inspections throughout the course of the project, and the building inspector came out in 1984 and did a final inspection and approved the work. Flash forward about 40 years, the Seymours sell the property to Mr. White, advertised as a, quote, legally recognized 3-unit building. In connection with Mr. White's redevelopment efforts that we were here for a few months ago, Dr. Hutton has issued several evolving zoning determinations over the past several months. I'm not going to go into the details of those right now. I will as part of the administrative appeal if we get that far. But the long and short of it is that Dr. Hutton ultimately concluded that the city shouldn't have issued the building permit in 1984 because the property didn't comply with frontage and parking requirements that the 1984 ordinance imposed. Specifically, Dr. Hutton believes the 1984 ordinance the conversion in 1984 was not allowed because the minimum lot frontage in the RN zoning district was 80 feet. The property only had 60 feet of frontage. And on the parking, 3 units required 5 parking spaces, and Dr. Hutton believes that there are only 2 stacked parking spaces at the property. We disagree with both of those determinations. That's the subject of our administrative appeal. But this application for the equitable waiver presumes that Dr. Hutton's rulings are correct. It's an alternative request for relief to ask for equitable waivers for those perceived violations. Since the violations are more than 10 years old, under the equitable waiver statute, we have to prove 2 criteria. First statutory criteria is that the physical or dimensional violation does not constitute public or private nuisance or diminish the value of other property in the area, nor interfere with or adversely affect any present or permissible future uses of any such property. Second, that due to the degree of past construction or investment made in ignorance of the facts constituting the violation, the cost of correction so far outweighs any public benefit to be gained that it would be inequitable to require the violation to be corrected. Both of those are a mouthful. I guess let me address the frontage issue first. The property has 60 feet of frontage. This is an old lot. It's had 60 feet of frontage since day 1 in the 1800s when it was created. The deficiency we're talking about is 20 feet. It's 60 feet instead of 80. That deficiency has existed for over 100 years and hasn't caused any nuisance, public or private, in the neighborhood, and it hasn't diminished any surrounding property values. The frontage is what it is and what it always has been. Plainly hasn't interfered with the current or permissible future uses of the property, and the frontage deficiency is purely a function of the age and the age of the neighborhood. Looking at the GIS map, and you have it, I think, as a packet, Exhibit D in the package as well. There's a number of other properties in this neighborhood that are multifamily and do not have 80 feet of frontage. The 2 examples we call out in the application are 8 Liberty Street at 70 feet. 1 Merrimack has 61 feet. So it's not unusual for the area. On the second criteria, the construction for the conversion was done in 1984. It's complete. It was done
at an expense of over $50,000 in 1984. That converts to over $150,000 in today's money. The building has 3 entirely separate dwelling units in it, each with their own kitchen, their own entrance, their own utility meters. The cost of eliminating a unit from that building would be significant. It would far exceed any public benefit. The other thing is that the Dr. Hutt's position here is that the building is a legal duplex, not 3 families. But if the enforcement action were taken and this was required to be a duplex instead of 3 family, it would be even less conforming in terms of the frontage requirements. Duplexes under the ordinance require enhanced frontage, 120 feet for a duplex. The 3 family, if that's what this is, only requires 80 feet. So reverting back to a duplex is going to make the frontage less compliant than it is with the 3 family that's there today. On the parking, 3 units required 5 parking spaces in 1984, same as the requirement today. The property, if you don't mind going back to the GIS, Tracy, I'd appreciate it. For the area, either way. So the property, you can see it has a fairly long driveway that comes in off of Pine Street that dead ends at the garage. It's about 90 feet long before it hits the garage. So there's more than enough room to get 2 cars in the garage and 3 cars in the driveway lined up in that 90 feet. This layout has existed for decades without causing any nuisance. We acknowledge that the spaces have to be stacked. We disagree that that's necessarily prohibited by the 1984 ordinance or today's ordinance, but they are, and they have to have backing into the street. This layout, aside from existing on this property for 100 years and 40 years as a multifamily, is a very similar layout to a lot of other multifamily properties in the neighborhood, and that's back on Exhibit D in your packets that Tracy had up a minute ago. Those are highlighted, and you can see, even just based on the GIS map, these are all multifamily properties that are identified. I think a couple of them are cut off on the screen, but there are 4 or 5 of them all in the surrounding blocks that have similar style, single driveway that comes in and dead ends at a garage, which is probably very common for single-family homes, which has continued when a lot of these homes were converted to multifamily. So given that this has been a long-standing layout on this property and the prevalence of similar layouts in the neighborhood, I think it's apparent that it does not diminish surrounding property values or interfere with the use of the properties. And as I noted a moment ago, the conversion is done. It was expensive to do. It would be expensive to undo. And going back to a 2-family with parking as well doesn't eliminate any parking nonconformity. It reduces the parking count, the required parking, from 5 to 4. But there's still going to be stacking in the driveway. There's still going to be backing to the street. There's just going to be one less car there. So there's really no public benefit to be gained by enforcing this 40-year-old zoning violation. Sometimes these zoning violations pop up because homeowners are do-it-yourself homeowners and they do work without getting proper permits, or it's fly-by-night type of operation where some work is done when it shouldn't have been done. But here you have a family who went through all the proper courses back in 1984 and was transparent with the city, pulled the correct permits, had inspections done by the city, and whether the building inspector at that time missed the frontage issue and missed the parking issue, or whether the building inspector at that time had a different interpretation of the zoning ordinance than Dr. Hutton does today, it doesn't change the fact that it's all been there for 40 years. There haven't been any problems, and it would really be very inequitable to require a unit be eliminated from this building.
I've got 2 items I'd like some clarification on. One is, can you explain about the 3-family requiring 80 feet and the 2-family requiring 150 feet or whatever it was?
Yeah, it's something funky in the ordinance where 3-family, the actual use that this falls under, there's a use category for converting a residential building to multiple units. That use category just requires a minimum frontage of any lot in the zoning district, which is 80 feet. If you're going to do a duplex, there's a separate set of supplemental standards that require enhanced lot size and enhanced frontage. And I think it's multiplied by 1.5 or 1.25, which gets you up to 120 feet of frontage that you need if you're going to have a duplex there. The enhancements only apply if it's a duplex. For whatever reason in the ordinance, they don't apply to anything other than a duplex.
And was that the 84 ordinance or no?
Both.
Okay. The second question has to do with how does getting an equitable waiver solve your legal problem here exactly?
Well, the legal problem here is that we have a determination from the city that the property is non-compliant and was non-compliant from day one, 1984. So the equitable waiver would excuse the perceived non-compliance for the frontage and the parking, which are the two requirements that are perceived to be not met for the current use of the property.
Okay. So, but how does that affect the parking, for example?
Well, so the equitable waiver for the parking would allow the existing configuration, the existing layout of the driveway to remain. And it would say essentially that the staff parking spaces and the backing into the street, if it was a violation in 1984, is excused because it's been there for 40 years and hasn't caused any problems.
So the equitable waiver essentially releases you from whatever violation you did or didn't commit in the 84 ordinance.
Correct.
And allows you therefore to be a grandfathered use, effectively.
Yeah, I don't know that it would be a grandfathered use, but it would excuse the violations from the 1984 ordinance of the property. I think in my mind, and Dr. Hutton can correct me if she doesn't agree with it, would be compliant as of today.
Okay. Is that how you read it, Tracy?
Yep, and, the assistant solicitor and I looked at this in great detail. Neither of us have an objection to the equitable waiver.
Why do you think it's a duplex, not a three-family?
If we got into the administrative appeal, I would explain further, but it's been used as a duplex. The third unit hasn't.
That's
on the inspection from the assessors, there's some discrepancies.
But it exists, the third unit.
Very good. Any other questions?
So this has no direct connection to the previous construction that you were contemplating. This is just basically just to allow you to continue to use it as it's been used for years.
The construction's been abandoned, we're just going to not do that.
Got it.
Very good. Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Is there anyone who'd like to be heard in favor of this appeal? Please come forward.
Hi,
Hello.
my name is Jenny Besh, and
Do you swear to tell the truth, Ms. Bash?
I do.
Thank you.
Would
Would you jot your name down here?
Sign my name in, and my husband could not make it tonight, but we are the abutters at 7 Pine Street, and I learned some interesting things tonight, but I would like to clarify a couple things. And one is, we have lived in our property at 7 Pine Street for 22 years, and during the 22 years we have lived there, that has never been a multi-unit house. When we moved in, Virginia Seymour and her husband Ross lived in the ground floor, and their adult son Christian lived upstairs. Christian eventually moved out. Ross moved to a nursing home, and Virginia has been there ever since. So to say that for the past 40 years, parking and in the driveway has not been an issue is not really a reality, because Virginia did not drive, Ross did not drive. There was only one vehicle there ever in the 22 years that we've been there. I do want to point out a couple of things, and that is that I had no knowledge, about in 1984. We had not yet moved into our house. We moved in 1992. About getting the permits, I will say this. I know Mr. White to be a builder or a contractor. And I'm surprised that he would not have looked into this a little more thoroughly before purchasing the property. And, you know, caveat emptor, buyer beware, he might have wanted to do his homework a little more thoroughly. Secondly, I do want to point out that, you know, from the moment he bought the property, he sort of went into full speed ahead mode. And what I feel like is happening here a little bit is, you know, if we go ahead and move people in and build, you know, replace windows and add, you know, structures to the outside, and then claim, well, we didn't know and we put all this investment in, therefore we need a waiver, that's a little disingenuous. And that I would hope that other builders do their homework a little more carefully. The other thing I will mention is that, you know, I can say from my own experience with a couple children with cars that we do have to play the driveway shuffle, as they will have to do with 5 cars in their driveway. And you know, I will say that, you know, it's one thing when everybody's in the same family. It's another thing when you're talking tenants and trying to get people to move in and out of the driveway. And I did notice that in the first snowstorm, the tenants were parking on the street. So I want to point that out. I guess my final point is this is my 3rd trip down here. And I hope that we can resolve this and put it, you know, make a decision so that I don't have to keep coming back and defending my property, which I do feel there is, you know, a diminishment to my property by having more activity next door, more issues with parking. I'm quite concerned Mr. White owns the property on the corner and continues to take down more trees on that property. So I'm already concerned that, you know, in efforts to improve this property, that he will continue to do that on this property.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anyone else who'd like to be heard in favor?
I'd like to hear it. I'm actually not a builder, I'm a commercial insurance agent, so.
Very good, bud. You'll have a chance to speak again. Is there anyone else who'd like to be heard from the general public? Please come forward. May we assume that you're still Mr. Schweiker and that you're still under oath?
Yes, do I have to sign it again or not?
I don't think so.
Okay. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know whether this equitable waiver is fair, that this thing was, you know, unfortunately approved in the past and should be allowed to continue. I'm not going to speak on that. I'm just going to greatly emphasize what she says about stacking driveways. I mean, I have the same issue, you know, there's not enough space for the cars to park. They don't want to shift each other. People work different shifts, so the one that comes in the last, you know, doesn't want to have to get up in the morning and move their car, so they leave it on the street. And, you know, they got a short frontage, so maybe they're even parking in front of somebody else's house because there's not enough room to park all the cars in front of their own house. And so it's really an issue, and I don't know how to take care of it. I don't know if you folks have any authority to, with the conditions of approval, say that nobody in this place is allowed to park on the street. I assume you don't have that authority, but
no, I don't think we do.
It would certainly be interesting to you know, get something like that in the ordinance, that if, you know, people want to say we're going to all park in our driveway, make them actually do it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Anyone else like to be heard? Any comments from code enforcement?
Not on the equitable waiver.
All right. With that, we'll invite Mr. Arnold and Mr. White to come forward and offer any factual clarification they would like us to hear.
The only thing I just wanted to re-emphasize is that with respect to the stacking spaces, the difference that we're talking about here is 1 car. Because if it's a duplex, 4 spaces are required. Those are allowed under Dr. Hutton's ruling. And and so the additional unit is only brings it up to 5 parking spaces.
And you said there are 3 units.
3 units, correct, that were built in 1984.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And you said there's a garage,
There's a 2-car garage at the end of the driveway.
so that counts for 2 spaces.
2 spaces would fit in there, and the driveway is 90-something feet long, so there's room for at least 3 cars to stack up in that driveway.
Understood. Thank you.
Thanks.
With that, we'll declare the public testimony portion of the hearing closed, and I'll invite discussion by the board on the equitable waiver. We won't recap all the testimony. Essentially, we heard that building was rendered a 3-family in 1984 legally at the time, and that the appellant would like the board to essentially bless that status by granting an equitable waiver. And I'm going to pass this over to Mr. Evans for his comment.
I guess I'm a little concerned about the stacking of the parking. I'm not sure there's much we can do about that. The fact that these were granted permits, did I get that correct? And inspections were performed. I think that leads me to want to approve those waivers.
Mr. Wallner, how do you see it?
It was 3 units in 1984. They took all the steps required. The city approved it. Maybe they shouldn't have, but they did. And I think we've got to live with that. And so I'm inclined to grant the equitable waiver.
Mr. Winters?
I mean, it's pretty fortuitous for them that it went all the way to the Supreme Court and it's in the published decision that this was a 3-unit. So it's hard to dispute that. I don't doubt what the neighbor said. Maybe it was sort of not completely used, all 3 units, if there's family living there, but if it was approved by the city as for a 3-unit and laid out that way, then I think they meet the equitable waiver standards.
They must have been really burned to take an $80,000 project all the way to the Supreme Court. Ms. Dr. Morgan?
I agree.
I agree with my colleagues as well. I think equitable waiver is justified for the reasons they've cited. Would anyone care to make a motion?
I'll move to approve.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? The vote is unanimous. The equitable waiver is granted.
Do you mind if I take a 2-minute break?
No, not at all. Please do. Anyone else want to take a break? Break now.
We don't need. So the various.
There are refreshments and souvenirs available in the lobby. A word from the home front.
Mary Jane is home, but I don't know if we're going up tomorrow morning yet or not.
At Cheap and Dale.
You know, it's funny, she had Parkinson's disease. Just
open and recess the case till the February meeting?
Moved.
Is there a second? This was case 0121, and this was the conditional appeal based on the equitable waiver not being approved of the zoning administrator's determination. We're not going to act on that this evening. We will defer that for at least 2 months. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The vote is unanimous. All right, that brings us to the next case, which is 54 North Main Street, Central Business Performance District. Sikorowski Associates are the owners, LLC. The applicant is proposing a complete redevelopment of 4452 North Main Street, the CVS building, and 5456 North Main Street, the E&P Hotel, along with a connection to and renovation of 3442 North Main Street, known as the Phoenix Hall, and is requesting variances to the following. Article 28.4.1H, Table of Dimensional Regulations, to allow a portion of the proposed building to be constructed to a maximum height of 88 feet, where 80 feet is allowed. And Article 28.4.1G2, Dimensional Standards, to allow partial obstruction of the view of the State House Dome from Interstate I-93. Is there any more text for this? No, that's it. Which is also not permitted.
Good evening.
Gentlemen, swear to tell the truth and nothing but.
I do.
We do.
Would you identify yourself? You're all signed in. Would you identify yourselves for the record as you testify, please?
Happy to do that, Mr. Chairman. I'm Ari Pollack of the Gallagher firm here for Sikorowski Associates, the landowner and applicant tonight. Joining me this evening to my right is Mark Sikorowski, the owner and developer, and to his right is Anthony Mento, an architect for the project from SMP, and to my left is Jeff Lewis, an engineer from North. The project itself is a complete redevelopment of 44 to 52 North Main Street. You'll recall this is essentially the CVS building and the E&P Hotel, along with a connection proposed to a renovated Phoenix Hall at 34 to 42 North Main Street. That's the project. The subject properties, this project site, it's all within the Central Business Performance District, CBP, in the ordinance. Preservation and development of historic Phoenix Hall, including its unique performance space, storied history, presidential visits, presidential candidates. Its heritage has been featured in the Concord City Master Plan in multiple editions. It's been noteworthy in many resources for decades. The demolition of the former E&P Hotel is a necessary component of this project, an infill project. It was recently in front of the Concord Heritage Commission, and it received unanimous approval, which, as this board knows, is a rare endorsement for only the most notable projects. The applicant has filed conceptual plans. That's the existing condition on the board there before you now. If we went to the third slide, please, that one is the proposed condition. And it is the subject of two variance requests that are before you tonight. The first is a run-of-the-mill request for building height relief. The table of dimensional regulations in the ordinance allows a height of 80 feet in the CBP district, whereas we're seeking a variance to build to 88 feet. I'll obviously get into the details there. The second request is a little more nuanced. We're asking for a variance from narrative language in Article 28.4.1b2, probably not one you spend a lot of time on, allowing a partial obstruction, not a full obstruction, I'll again get into the details, but a partial obstruction of views of the State House Dome from the interstate highway, not generally from various viewpoints, but from the interstate. We believe other aspects of the proposed redevelopment, as you see here on the screen, can be accomplished in compliance with the terms of the ordinance, subject, of course, to typical site plan review and the jurisdiction of the planning board. As far as the straight-up height variance is concerned, building height, as you know, is measured from average mean grade around the building. In this case, the subject property, which I don't know if the pointer is around here anywhere, maybe not, but anyway, the variance request is only relative to a portion of what you see there. Thank you so much. So in other words, it's from this wall to this wall, and the variance relates to what you see here on the top, and actually what you can see in this view starts here. It's recessed from the front of the building. I'll get into that as well. Essentially, going from 80 feet to 88 feet allows for this portion of the structure here. We're not seeking any variance for this area here or this area here. Those are compliant at 80 or under. Much under, actually. In this case, the subject property, the base grade varies 10 feet from Main Street in the front, if you will, or the west, to Low Avenue in the rear or the east. And the grade falls away from front to rear, west to east. The rear street is called Low Avenue for a reason. The grade differential means that the total proposed building height from North Main Street is actually 83 feet. So if you were to be measuring from here to here, it would actually be 83 feet. If we had a back of the building view, which I don't think we do, the back of the building would be 93 feet from what's in the back over here, if this building wasn't here, to the top back here, which you can't even see. And that gets us to the average variance request of 88 feet. Additionally, the height restriction of the average 80 feet falls in the midst of the proposed top floor. And so what we're really seeking is a minimum variance to allow us to complete that partial floor. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This is a 7th floor. The 80-foot cutoff is right in here. We want to finish that floor. What's on that floor, you might ask? Well, it is intended to be a rooftop restaurant venue, which has absolutely no relevance to the request, but nonetheless is pretty cool. It would be accessed by elevators. It's open to the public. It would be a restaurant just like all the other restaurants in town. The restaurant could, I'm sure I'll get the question, so we'll do it now. You could eliminate one of these floors and have the restaurant occur at this level instead of this level. Why aren't we doing that? We aren't doing that because, quite honestly, the meat and potatoes of the pro forma for this project is residential. 1, 2, 3, 4 floors of residential market value apartments. And without that income and cash flow, the project, it flips from top right side up to right side down. It's that simple. Mark Zaborowski, the owner, has penciled this out every way he can think of, and that's the honest truth. The variance would allow for a reasonable use for building height, considering that the Central Business Performance District already allows high-rise structures and that the requested variance seeks an average amount of relief of 8 feet. It's a 10% variance, 8 being 10% of 80. And from Main Street, only a 3-foot variation. Additionally, the proposed building height is consistent with other existing structures along the Main Street corridor. We have a slide in the deck a few sheets down. If we could, was that it? No, keep going. That's it. Thank you. That's the Kennedy Building on South Main Street. That one, it's not the greatest quality copy. It's a scan, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 floors. And I think it's, we counted from the front to the top of 85 feet. Now, this one, of course, is on the west side of Main Street. So it increases from front to rear. It was built, I believe, on federal property, which probably did not require compliance with the ordinance, which may or may not have had a performance district at the time, probably not. This building dates back at least to the 70s, maybe the 60s. The public interest of granting this variance is a redevelopment of underperforming elements of Concord's Main Street. If we could go back to the very first slide, please. Sorry to jump around. Maybe I can do that on here. I don't even know how to use this thing.
No, it's a PDF.
Okay. What you see here is the CVS building. At times, it's been shuttered, which is why we said that. I think there's a seasonal tenant in there now. It comes and goes, but it's clearly not what the Performance District envisions for what really would become a crown jewel of Main Street. Of course, that's the vision for the project. The rooftop venue, which you saw from the front and has a sort of top-down plan on the fourth or fifth sheet of the packet. Jumping around again. One more. That's it. Again, it wouldn't be visible from the sidewalk in front of Main Street because it's set back from the front. Right. So in other words, this is the structural line for that 7th floor, whereas this is the front facade of the building, and this is the sidewalk of Main Street and the parking area and the travel lane. It, again, is about 40%. Actually, I should trace right here. It's about 40% of the total of that building. So what we're asking for is to cover 40% of the footprint with 8 more feet of height. That's a mouthful, but that's the best way I can think of to describe it. The spirit and intent of the ordinance and substantial justice, the requested variance would be consistent with the intent of the ordinance to develop mixed-use properties on the Main Street corridor and otherwise facilitate a conforming project and a desirable project in a performance district. This district wants these projects. We've just got to figure out how to make them fit. Substantial justice would be served in that, again, the requested variance is 10% of what can be constructed by right, and it's actually only half of that along the Main Street corridor, the 83 feet from bottom to top. Value of surrounding properties. I want to slice this one thinly because we're not talking about the whole project, right? We're talking about the variance request. There's no evidence to suggest that surrounding properties would suffer any material devaluation as a result of a 10% height variance. And to put that a little differently, there's no reason to conclude that someone who lives near or owns near or adjacent to this property would be any differently affected by 88 feet instead of 80. Additionally, the replacement of the former CVS is most likely to enhance values along the corridor, providing an anchor property and an anchoring presence as opposed to what we have now, which, no offense to anyone or current tenants, certainly does not have the appearance of anything permanent. I wanted to shift gears to the viewscape variance and then conclude our presentation and be available for questions.
Could you just take hardship again on that one for me?
What is the hardship? Essentially, it's the grade difference from front to rear. It's dropping from Main Street to Low Avenue. I love that. 10 feet.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, so if this building were on the other side of Main Street, it would be an 83-foot height. It would only be a 3-foot height variance, but because of the grade differential, and then again, 60% of the building is within the height limit. It's that 40% which will be set back so it won't be visible from Main Street, and so that 40% is.
So was I following correct that the height is going to be the rebuild is going to be the same height as now, or is it going to be higher?
Higher.
Higher.
So it's good. Okay. Then what is it now?
For the CVS building? Let's, if we could we go back to the proposed, so here.
So it's go up here. They're going to
demo the E&P Hotel and the CVS and construct a new building, 60% of that structure will be under 80 feet. 40% will be to 88 feet mean height.
So how many feet?
So can you go back to the last, sorry. So when you rebuild the E&P Hotel, that's 83 feet?
That one would be under 80 feet.
Under 80 feet.
Correct. It's just, so again, let me just highlight, you see that elevation change from here to here?
Yeah.
That's the variance. That's the 40% of what's going on the top of this roof that needs an adjustment on permitted height.
And how far over does it go?
So now if we can go back to the plan view,
Yeah.
right there's the wall. So it's from here across to here, and it starts, whatever that is, 10 or 12 feet back from the facade.
Initially, I already pointed on the third slide, I already pointed with the green arrow to the end of the dock, but it actually does not extend that far for the 40%.
So we can come back to any of this, but to just keep moving, we wanted to move on to the other slide, which is this one requires some explaining. This is the request to vary the obstruction or allow a partial obstruction of the views of the State House dome, which is right here. That's the State House. And this, of course, is I-93. The language of the ordinance is really interesting. It says that you should not obstruct the views of the State House dome as can be seen from a passenger vehicle and then traveling Interstate 93. Odd to me that it says not obstruct. It doesn't say anything about a partial obstruction. I realize that's splitting hairs. We talked with the code office about it. They said, yeah, apply for a variance. It also makes reference to passenger vehicles. I don't know why. They go just as fast as the other vehicles. Applicants' materials illustrate the degree of obstruction. On this slide, let me show you, and again, it's a little bit hard to see, and maybe it's better in your packets, but what we've tried to do here is calibrate the degree of time that it is partially obstructed. So it's essentially where these arrows are. There's two, there's one below it as well. There it is. So here and here, you have a bit of obstruction. And then if you can see here that this one is A and this one is B, that corresponds to the next two sheets. The next sheet of the packet is view A, where you can see, yeah, maybe we can, right, exactly. So this is today's view, the existing condition from that perspective of A, and this is the proposed condition with the building constructed, and I should also say with a variance for the 88 feet. And so this is what is proposed, as you saw tonight, over what exists today. Again, you can see the top, it's partial, but yeah, it's obstructed for a matter of seconds as you are moving north at 65 miles an hour. Same for B, if we could go to that one. This is up the highway just a touch more. And again, you can see it in the existing condition, and in the proposed, it's partially obstructed. It's like partial obstructed seats at a concert. You can still tell what's going on, but you don't see everything.
So once you clear the building, then you're going to get the full view again.
You're going to get whatever's there irrespective of our building. I actually couldn't tell you whether it's obstructed by something else or not. But it wouldn't.
I'm going to ask.
Yeah, so there are a number of obstructions, like, for example, that tree. We don't control that tree. I don't know who owns the tree. But that tree, when you're down south of this area for view B on the highway, you've already blocked the whole view of this with this tree. And what we're showing you is just the area blocked by the building where proposing. We're not showing you what happens when you line up with this tree and can't see anything.
If you're traveling north, there's actually a good stretch of tree line that blocks the view for a much longer distance than the proposed building would obstruct it, just from growth along the highway. So there's already a long stretch that is obstructed by existing trees.
Do you happen to know, are there any existing obstructions from any buildings?
There is one. I have to take a look at this, knowing this case was coming the other day. Driving up the road, and I think one of the buildings over in the neighborhood of the shopping plaza there actually does obscure it. I think it's a gable on the top of one of those.
The market basket, or before that?
It's Capitol Shopping Center area there. I believe there is one building, but we're talking nanoseconds here. It's not, doesn't last for long.
So that's kind of the whole point we're trying to make, which is the applicant's materials, excuse me, illustrate a degree of partial obstruction, which is intermittent and for moments as travelers pass at highway speeds. Frankly, I don't know who is looking in this direction instead of the road, but the ordinance says what it says.
Well, that's why they said.
Maybe the chairman is, I don't know.
No, I was driving.
No, of course not.
And the city, as you know, has been encouraging the redevelopment of the shopping plaza, on many levels. And should the shopping plaza get, redeveloped in a way that was even 1 story higher, it would probably block the whole view because you're obviously that much closer to the road, so it takes less height to obstruct it.
I don't know about that particular structure you're referring to, but my suspicion is that it was developed before the performance district was created, and this language relates to the performance districts in the ordinance.
I can tell you.
Yeah. So anyway, quite
often proposed language to drop this in the new code going forward, to drop this language altogether, but that's proposed. The existing still has it, obviously.
we're still here.
We're still here.
But the hardship essentially comes from a viewscape requirement that is applied to this property, but actually is in conflict with the permitted height that's allowed in this district. It's really kind of, like I said at the beginning, it's a nuanced distinction where whether we're building 88 feet, whether we're building 80 feet, we're going to be proposing some obfuscation of this viewscape of the dome of the State House. And so, on the one hand, the ordinance says, sure, have an 80-foot tall building. On the other hand, it says, but don't block anything. And our hardship essentially is trying to live with both. And part of the compromise is a partial obstruction. We certainly have not come in here asking for a higher height variance blocking the entirety of the viewscape. In essence, the variance would allow us to compromise between competing portions of the same ordinance, actually the same article in the ordinance. A reasonable use, we think so. The variance is for a partial obstruction, and it allows really what we're calling a generational opportunity on Main Street, again, in a performance district where these types of projects are embraced. And I'll make the other point with this slide up. The viewscape is already impacted by a number of other obstructions. Maybe there is another building. Certainly there are trees and vegetation. There are buildings and highway signs, and just the sheer configuration of ramps and highway access grading also will obstruct the view as you come up the road. I did sneak a couple of peeks. Moreover, DOT is, as you probably are aware, proposing the redesign of most of this interstate corridor through Concord. And so while the DOT's 10-year plan is never written in stone, hasn't passed the legislature, even if it did, would be subject to change, this viewscape will change just by virtue of work to be done on the road, having nothing to do with the ordinance or its protective characteristics of the viewscape. I mention that only because there's so much that's out of our control that it's hard to It's hard to live with this type of restriction, which I think, in terms of spirit and intent of the ordinance, I mean, it's meritorious, it's noteworthy, it's good, quote unquote, but I don't know that it should be enforced in its strictest terms to nullify what would be an otherwise desirable project. I think the language is protective, it serves its purpose, it certainly calmed us down from a full obstruction, and so great. But as Mark said, I think the language has been identified as an awkward fit going forward, and while that's not been adopted anywhere and may never be, it's at least some community recognition that this might not make a lot of sense anymore. In terms of the value of surrounding properties, again, there's no evidence to suggest that the properties that surround our project, our site, whatever the address is, 40-something and 50-something North Main Street, there's no evidence to suggest that a partial obstruction versus an unobstructed view, which, by the way, I guess is partially obstructed, depending on how you characterize dome, how much is the dome. If it's just the gold part, maybe we're actually not obstructing. But anyway, I think it's probably the whole tower. And there's no evidence to suggest that a partial obstruction would affect any property values. And again, we would point out the converse, which is a nice redevelopment in the downtown, would most likely have a positive impact on surrounding property values. I'll stop there. We are all here, owner, architect, engineer, and we love questions.
Are there any questions from the board?
Would you ever consider putting the restaurant on top of the Phoenix Hall?
I think it's been talked through, and frankly, the Phoenix Hall structure is not going to be raised. It's going to be rehabilitated, and putting more on that structure is problematic.
The existing structure would not support it on the floor. It's just not built for it. The existing truss system, roof system wouldn't support the weight of an additional floor.
Other questions?
So if approved, would that make this the tallest building in Concord?
Well, I think it's going to depend on where you measure from. I
guess, or it'll be close.
It's going to be close. I couldn't say with certainty yes or no, but it'd be in the ballpark of the 80 footers. Yeah.
Probably shorter than the chapel at St. Paul's steeple.
Again, it's all about where you measure from.
Yeah. And it is a few feet shorter than the Kennedy building.
Kennedy building.
Yeah.
But if you're like along the skyline,
You'd notice it.
Yeah.
But again, 80 feet by right.
Right. And the 80 feet is measured by the mean?
It's the average mean grade around the bottom of the building, where the building touches the ground.
Again, the skyline is view from Main Street. The whole Main Street edge will be under the 80 feet. It's just that 40% which is set back.
Mm-hmm.
So the front edge of the building, the entire front edge of the building will be under the height limit.
Mm-hmm.
The closest building that has height is the Capitol Commons building, which is just south down Main Street, where the Hotel Concord is currently. And that building's height is very close to what we're proposing. I'm not certain. We were involved in the project, but not the design of the main building. And the average mean grade is in question because of the way in which the grade slopes.
Mm-hmm.
But the city built a parking garage in the back on Store Street. So I don't know how they made the math work, but it's close.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions? Thank you, gentlemen.
It's a project that it's a very, very challenging project. Even with the additional floor, this project is upside down to pro forma. The numbers, I'm really, really working hard to make the project work. It's between construction costs and interest rates. But it would be, if I can pull it off, it would be, I really believe it would be a once-in-a-generation project that would just be incredible for our downtown.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Can I ask one question?
Yeah, sure.
Oh, probably has nothing to do with the variances you're asking, but what do you do about parking for these apartments?
So it's an issue. The ordinance doesn't require parking for
Right.
this facility, but we have some spaces.
I have, I own the property where Chuck's Barber Shop is right now. There's a surf lot there. So first of all, we're going to put 21 spaces in the lowest level under the garage. So there will be 21 spaces in the, call it the basement of the building. So there's that. I have a surface lot, and I've talked to the city about there are spaces available in the, it's not the Durgan garage anymore. What do they call it? The School Street garage? The garage right across the street. There are city spaces there that are available on a monthly rate. So between the ones in the basement, my surface lot, and then the existing city garage, there is enough parking for the apartments.
And we will get more questions about that from the planning board.
Sure.
What is the hotel use? Is it vacant now, or is it in use, the hotel?
Well, the E&P Hotel, it was actually, it's, the upper floors are completely dilapidated and unused right now. The ground level is hilltop consignment. So the ground level is hilltop consignment. The upper floors are completely dilapidated. It was part of the Phoenix Hotel back in the day. And the Phoenix Hotel had the upper floors, and there was a fire in 1956, and there's a brick wall there that stopped the fire from going into the north end of the building. But the egress was in the part where the CBS building was, so the egress got cut off. So since 1956, the upper floors above Hilltop consignment have just been no access, no egress, just dilapidated and deteriorating. So this project would dramatically bring up to, the density of a very underutilized lot right now.
Thank you.
Gentlemen,
Thank you.
you're welcome. Is there anyone who would like to be heard in favor of this appeal? Please come forward. Please come forward. The record will show that it is Mr. Roy Schweiker, and he is still sworn in.
If I'm in favor of something.
Yes, I mean, I thought that would shock you folks.
I'm a little startled.
But anyway, I mean, this is a highly imaginative project. It's going to be a great benefit to downtown. I do want to speak to a couple of the things they're saying. First off, in terms of the height, I don't know where they came up with the maximum height. Originally I thought it had to do with the fire department ladders, but then one might think that would be based, on the maximum height and not the average height. I mean, certainly you'd have a lot more trouble putting a ladder up in the back than you would in the front. But if that's not the purpose, it's just some random number, I can't see as a few more feet's going to be that much of a problem. And the second thing is the visibility. I remember when we were doing this originally, and I think the Hotel Concord did fine. It temporarily blocks part of the dome. And the thing is, there was a big argument at that time, the same thing you mentioned. Is the dome only the gold, or is it the level of light below it? And that was never fully resolved. And once again, I think it's a bit unfortunate, but one might remember that it wasn't that long ago they were talking about making it put 93 underground and building a park over the top of it. So obviously, if you're going to put 93 underground, that's going to greatly affect the visibility of the chaos from it.
I think you can be safe in saying that.
So, maybe the thing should go away. It hasn't gone away yet, but I think they made a case for it's not that much worse than anywhere else.
No, this thing you mean the Gold Dome provision.
Visible to the Gold Dome, yes. And the last thing, as far as how this affects adjoining properties, I can see that if Mr. Siborowski is really successful with this in Phoenix Hall and everything, he charges a parking downtown for all events. It'll have a huge adverse effect on the downtown, but at the same time, the city doesn't seem to care. They seem to think, build stuff, and the ordinance doesn't require them to provide the parking, so I don't see how you can make them do it.
And we are not being asked to.
So I guess that's why I'm in favor. It seems like, the issues with it are, probably less bad than the great desirability of this existing, particularly if it's a resounding success.
Thank you very much. Would anyone else like to be heard? Please come forward. Good evening. Swear to tell the truth and nothing but it.
I do.
Would you sign in there, please?
My name is Joseph Conway. I'm here representing Barat Holdings. We're in a butter to the proposed project. We're in a butter on the north end of the project. We own the buildings from the Post Restaurant to Walton Mutual Bank. Unfortunately, in the photos here, you don't see us. We're left out.
Dr. Hyde will remedy.
But I am going to speak not in support of the variance for the 88 feet as opposed to the 80 feet. I'm not going to address the second variance because that's kind of nebulous with how you drive 93, how fast you're going, and how you're looking at things. But as proposed, I guess I look at it from the standpoint of principle. We have current zoning on the book. We have current zoning regulations. As a developer and an architect, and if you're a professional, you know what the zoning regulations are. And when you're designing a building from the ground up, those should be first and foremost in your design scheme. The fact that you have to add a floor to make it financially feasible, that shouldn't be a criteria for zoning. That should be a criteria for the developer looking at this to say, is this something that I should go forward with? This building as proposed, I think it's a great building, but it should be done within the confines of the zoning regulations. There are a number of factors with the design in this building that negatively affect our buildings. That's not a conversation for here, that's a conversation for planning. I have the same concerns as Mr. Evans as far as parking. We also own a 3-tier parking lot adjacent to this building, which is behind our building. Our parking lot is full. Low Ave, which they joke about, its name is because of its thing. Low Ave, on any given day right now, with the density of what is on Main Street and behind Main Street, Low Ave is a nightmare to navigate. Adding 50 to 100 cars a day for permanent residents there, the impact to Low Ave will be negative. Impact to our building, we don't see it here, is I'm going to have a building which abuts our current building, which is going to have a wall that's going to be 20 to 30 feet higher than it currently is. That's going to have a structural impact to my building because of snow loads. But that's an argument for planning. So, from the standpoint, I think it's great that Mark is looking at building a wonderful structure on Main Street, but it should be done in the confines of what zoning is, not what he thinks it should be. So, we want to go on record to say we're not in support of the variance. This will be a long process, but, you know, when I hear that there's going to be no negative impact to the butters, I have to strongly disagree. You know, most of his abutters are Mark Zaborowski, so there is no impact. If you go to the north, it's different.
The impact is superstructure on the building he's proposing that actually doesn't reach over to the far north end of the.
Oh yes, it does.
Of the property.
It touches my building.
Can you explain how that is? It doesn't look that way to me on the plans.
Okay, because we don't have a slide there.
Oh, let's put it back up.
Okay. The hotel, which is going to tear down, that hotel and our building at 58 North Main Street share a common wall.
Right.
Okay? That wall can't be taken down. But the trick with the demolition of that is the carrying timbers for the floors. Those carrying timbers are built into the wall. So it's going to have to be done very delicately so as not to impact that wall. But that's not a conversation for here. When the superstructure of the building now goes 20 feet above my building and touches the building, that changes the snow load on the existing.
No, I understand that, but are we talking about the superstructure that exceeds 80 feet, or are we talking about the superstructure that is within the 80 feet?
Within the 80 feet.
Okay. In that case, we have no jurisdiction.
Oh, I know you don't, but I'm just saying the total variance, because we're talking even higher above that, and that's gonna have impact also.
So you're saying it's gonna have impact either way, but the impact is gonna be greater because of the higher amount of the height.
Correct. So, changes the flow of the wind.
You gotta go further north.
You know? And then, but the current structure is also gonna obstruct windows on our third floor tenants. But the height of the building itself, you don't see it here, is going to obviously be much greater than the 4 stories that are currently there.
There we are up there.
There you are up there. Now, when the hotel comes down, new building goes up 6 stories. Pretty easy to see what happens.
What's the height of your building,
I'd have to measure it.
roughly?
It's 4 stories. So you're probably talking that front high on Main Street is probably 55 feet.
Is there anything else you can like us to know?
No, I just wanted to put that on record.
Very good. Thank you.
for your time.
Is there anyone else who'd like to be heard? Please come forward. Swear to tell the truth and nothing but?
I do.
Would you identify yourself for the record as you
Sure.
testify, please?
My name's Alan Hirschlag. Let me sign in here. I'll address. So good evening. A couple of things I'd like to speak to.
Are you in favor or in opposition?
Mixed.
All right.
So I think it's a wonderful project. Unfortunately, I think our current zoning is in the way of the project. Our current zoning, our proposed zoning is going into its 7th year since it was proposed to the City Council. Whether or not I agree or disagree on whether we should remove or continue to keep the requirement not to block the State House, I don't think that's the issue. The issue is that it is currently encoded. I'd like to a short statement and then address some specifics regarding the testimony from the applicant, where I think there were some statements that were not accurate. Just a quick look back at the Concord Hotel building. When the project came before the planning board for approval, the vote was delayed 1 month as the board, after being informed, realized they had not required the applicant to provide information that would determine the building would not obstruct the view of the State House dome. At the next monthly meeting, just moments before the meeting was set to begin, the applicant provided a report to the board. Until this time, the report had not been available to the planning department, the planning board, or the public. At the previous meeting, after public testimony had been taken, the chair closed the public meeting portion of the meeting. No new public testimony will be allowed at the second board meeting. The planning board accepted and approved the applicant's report after much discussion, ruling that it did not obstruct the view of the dome. I had requested that the determination be delayed until the city administration and the public could have a chance to review and comment on the applicant's report. But because no public testimony was being allowed, my plea was not considered. After the building was constructed, a portion of the State House dome's view was obstructed. The ZBA should not consider the obstructing of the dome as precedent. No request for obstructing the view of the dome had been made by the applicant. No waivers or variances were requested. In fact, it was the applicant's report that assured the planning board the view of the State House dome would not be obstructed. The obstructing of the view of the State House dome only occurred because of a lack of due diligence by the planning board. I have copies of that I'll hand out to you folks. I'll pass that out at the end. In the application by Mr. Siborowski, in Roman numeral 3:1, he says, in essence, a variance from one provision of the ordinance is necessary to exercise an entitlement granted in another. A unique conflict justifying relief. This is in relation to the height requirement. In fact, I don't believe that's the case. 28.4 in the zoning ordinance, development design standards, states table dimensional regulations in the base districts as established in Article 28.2, the zoning districts and allowable uses of this ordinance, building structures or impervious surfaces shall not be constructed except in conformance with standards set forth in the following table of dimensional regulations. I'm sorry, that's 28-4-1H.
I was wondering.
Yes, I'm sorry. Well, I'm glad I was able to clear that up.
Thank you very much.
And it goes on to say, subject to all other provisions and standards of this ordinance and other local, state, and federal laws, rules, and regulations. So there is no conflict. The 80-foot, and again, I don't have an issue with being 80 or 83 or 88 feet, but the issue is that there is no conflict between the height of the building and the blocking of the State House dome. It clearly states that if there are other provisions to prevent that height from occurring, that those provisions take precedence over the height, the allowable height. The second issue that comes to mind is in the Roman numeral 3, number 4, under spirit and intent. The language, while noteworthy, should be enforced as aspirational and not utilized to nullify otherwise desirable projects. It goes on, put differently, the ordinance must be interpreted as protecting the viewscape whenever possible. Mr. Pollack used the term should not, but that's not what the ordinance says. The ordinance, in all situations that I was able to find in search, says shall not obstruct. It's very clear. When he talks about aspirational, I agree. Aspirational is the master plan. There's a number of times, and I wasn't able to do a complete search in the master plan, and I'm not implying that I did a complete search in the zoning ordinances, so I think it was more complete. But there are a number of times in the master plan where there is talk about preserving the view of the State House dome. But in the zoning ordinances, it's extremely clear that the State House dome shall not be blocked. It talks about in the Central Performance District, under 28.2-210, the buildings and any additions to existing buildings in downtown Concord shall not be designed in such a manner as not to obstruct views of the State House dome. It talks about, in the opportunity part, it talks about dimensional standards. It talks about appertaining structures shall respect the surrounding vernacular architecture and views of the State House dome. I know it was noted in the applicant's application also under 28-41G2, within performance districts, a building structure or sign shall not obstruct the views of the State House dome as can be seen from a passenger vehicle. And 24-1G5C, the design of buildings or structures which exceed the height limit shall respect the surrounding vernacular architecture and views of the State House dome. So again, there is no, I think, contradiction between the height requirement and the requirement of not blocking the State House dome. And then 28.548, F views of the State House dome, view of the State House dome from I-93 and I-393 corridors shall not be obstructed by a building structure or sign in the CBP district in accordance with section 28.41G3. So, unfortunately, or fortunately for the city, this is an exceptional project. Unfortunately, I don't see how you allow it to go forward with current zoning. The fault isn't with Mr. Soborowski. The fault is with the city's unwillingness or inability to move forward with the zoning code that would allow a project of this nature to go forward, or to deny a project of this nature to go forward, but make it extremely clear in the zoning. Currently, I think our zoning department is trying to balance out the faults with our current zoning and trying to incorporate provisions from proposed zoning, even though those don't exist. I think I'll leave it at that, other than to say, again, I think it's extremely unfortunate, and I don't know how this board second guesses our zoning code. And again, whether you agree or disagree, or whether I agree or disagree with the zoning code, the zoning ordinances that don't allow the blocking or the obstruction of the State House dome, it's excessively clear in the zoning ordinances that that is not allowed. And I don't, unfortunately, see the hardship. What I see is an unfortunate situation that our city bodies have failed to act over 7 years to meet the aspirations and goals of what we say we want, even though they're not encoded in either our master plan or our zoning ordinances. Thank you for the time to testify.
Thank you. No questions. Would anyone else like to be heard? Please come forward. Hello. Swear to tell the truth and nothing but the truth. May we have your name, please?
My name is Scott Hardy, Scott Preston Hardy.
Would you jot that down on the sign-in sheet, please?
You forgive the mask, but I may have to go into the Federal Witness Protection Program after I'm done here.
Oh, well, it's too late for me, I'm afraid.
Hopefully not too incendiary, but I'm just an average bear. I don't have any budding properties. I don't have a big dog in this race, but I was born in '55, and I was a military brat. We lived all over the globe. I was in Concord in the '50s and '60s whenever my father got an isolated tour, and I've been here since 1970 straight, and he got out. He got out in '69, retired. Concord used to be a joke to be from Concord. Where from? You're from Concord? Yeah. Oh, you're from Concord. I've come to love the city. I'm a history buff. I got into the 19th century history of it all, Civil War, antebellum, Reconstruction, blah, blah, blah. Industrial. I love the city. First of all, Low Avenue was not named Low Avenue because it's low. It was a man's surname. It's got a block to it. The end of School Street. There's an open space there now. Used to be a newspaper there, Democratic Standard. Confederate hoopla printed up, and First New Hampshire came home from their '98 tour, pulled the printer out and burned it on Main Street right there.
This is a great story, but the evening is wearing
I'm
on,
sorry.
so let's talk about Mr. Sibrowski's
Why I'm
proposal.
here is because I heard the gentleman, forgive me, I heard the gentleman use the Capitol Commons building as more or less the template, and I'm asking that you please hold the line on the 80 feet here. It's great that something's going where the Phoenix Hotel used to be. It sounds like a great project, but that Capitol Commons Concord Hotel Concord never should happen. That thing's a monstrosity. And the skywalk, or whatever they call it at the top, that looks like it belongs to Logan Airport. You see that from the highway, it's hideous. Just have a little more respect is what I'm asking. A little more respect for the history of Concord, skyline, whether it's the dome or whatever, it doesn't matter. But it's like, we made one mistake, let's not make another, because two wrongs don't make a right. So I would say, hold the line on 80 feet and let them redo it. It'd be great. I'm sure it can be done. I hope so, because something's got to happen there. But you can't keep violating the rules here. We're not gonna have anything left to look at. There's signs out on the highways that says historic Concord. I feel like they should add, stop in to see historic Concord, but you better hurry up because we're we're tearing it down bit by bit here.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who'd like to be heard? Please come forward. Hello. Swear to tell the truth and nothing but. May we have your name, please?
Martin Daigle. Thank you for the notice that we got about this project and the meeting tonight. We reached it 7 months ago. We brought the property on 1 to 5 Depot Street. And this project's property line and our property line butt. And if this variance for this proposed facility of the Phoenix Hall Restoration Project, we have concerns of substantial loss of our value of our property. The final project that they showed on their websites and that he had here, in the outline of the project scope, lines 2 and 3 describe the construction of a stairwell that will completely and permanently block 7 of our windows, and they're in the 6 of them are in the residential unit, 1's in the commercial unit, and it also block the second egress to a commercial unit represents substantial loss.
Where is your building on this map?
We're in the back, so if our back of our building and the back of that building.
I'll
Sorry.
help too much.
It's on this-
If you want to stand up and point, that would be great.
Yeah.
Okay.
What's in that building now?
Astro Cigar Shop, Hobby's Place,
Right.
and there's 14 units in it.
Got it. All right.
So our lot lines intersect in the back
With the Phoenix building.
with marked buildings.
I think I'm concerned with if this gets approved and he has another step to go through and that gets approved, then he has another step to go and that gets approved. It's hard to stop that ball rolling when it affects us. And you've said, yes, we make some financial commitments to that position. Now we're like, wait, this hits us. But how do you say no now when you said yes? That's what I'm afraid of.
Can you tell us how the extra 8 feet on the building would affect your building?
It's not that. You go.
We're looking at the project as a whole. I know there's a reason to slice it, but we've heard about the entire project, the description of the entire project, and the benefit for the entire neighborhood for the entire project. So we're looking at the entire project, and this is the variance that's going to start that entire project. Part of that entire project needs a secondary staircase that will increase the first occupation from 100 to 500. That proposed staircase is going to come down and make contact with my building and obstruct 7 windows and 1 emergency egress in the commercial space.
I can see why that would be of concern to you, and you will have places where you can go to discuss that with the city. Unfortunately, we have absolutely no jurisdiction over those issues. So we can't help you. It's not a good use of your time to ask us because we just can't do it.
We just wanted to be on record for this.
You bet.
We feel it's a great project, but we can't support it.
Very good.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Is there anyone else who'd like to be heard? Any comments on code enforcement?
Not at this time.
Mr. Pollack, Mr. Siborowski, gentlemen, would you like to offer any factual clarification? I expect you might.
Yeah, I can be brief. A couple of the things that were mentioned bear some reply, albeit short. We certainly are aware of, we understand the zoning metrics. We do our best as a design team to abide by all of the zoning metrics. We understand that variances are the exception and not the rule. We skinnied this project down to its minimum so that we're here asking for the minimum amount of relief we need help with to make the project work. We're not here working backwards and applying on speculation. We've done the homework, feet. Variances exist to provide relief. This board exists to provide relief. If the ordinance was a static document that said, thou shalt not obstruct the dome, and there is no ability to put forward a question of variance, be it partial or complete, we would not have a project and we would not be here. But there is a mechanism to apply for a variance. We're asking for that exception for this project. We're not looking to set precedent around the community, and we have made no representation that the Hotel Concord project relied on, applied for a variance. I don't know whether they applied or not. I don't think so, but I really don't know, and I don't think it was part of our presentation that they did so, and we're not trying to follow suit. We're just explaining that there are other big buildings on Main Street, and ours would be one of several. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any questions from the board? Thank you. With that, we'll declare the public testimony portion of the hearing closed. We have requested 2 variances. One for an 8-foot excess over the 80-foot requirement. We heard arguments that the way the requirement is measured creates a problem based on the configuration of the lot and the topography around the lot. We also have a request for a variance to create a obfuscation or obscuration, or I'm not sure what the right word, of the State House Dome, however it's defined, as you travel north on I-93 coming into Concord. I'm going to start this one with Ms. Spector-Morgan. What are your thoughts on this one?
I love this project. I remember talking to Mark about this project 7 years ago, and I am so excited to see it coming forward, and I have every faith that my colleagues are going to grant you a variance. I, however, cannot vote for those variances because, again, I don't see the hardship. I think this arises from the design choice to have the rooftop restaurant, not from any hardship in the land.
Mr. Winters.
Yeah, I feel similarly, to be honest. It's a great project. I'm not personally, the view of the State Dome is nice, but it's not that important to me. Like, I know what it looks like, but it's obviously really important to some people, and I feel like this is something that the city. I think Mr. Hirschlag said it well, that the city needs to address something like this, because this isn't like a neighborhood issue. This is an issue that really affects the entire city, and to some extent the state, or probably the whole area. And the 80 feet, I'd love it to be 100 or 120 feet. I think it's good to have density. If you're going to have, let people live in a condensed area, it's a more efficient use. But I think that's really an issue that needs to be looked at by City Council. So I unfortunately feel the same way.
Very good. Mr. Wallner.
I agree on the first issue about the hardship in terms of the height.
The hardship, in other words, you do not see a hardship.
I do not. But I also disagree with the view issue. I think the view is very important of the State House Dome. The State House Dome is very unique in terms of all state capital State House domes. I believe it's one of less than a dozen that have a gold dome, and I think that gives it certainly a very unique quality for the city of Concord, and I think its view shouldn't be hampered.
Mr. Evans.
I do think there's some aspect to the lot and the elevations on the lot that make the measurement a little bit unique, and I think if there's a hardship, that's it. Otherwise, I think it's a financial hardship that they discussed and brought to us. As far as the dome, I think that's important, but when the testimony was that the word shall is being used, that's why we're here, because if it didn't say shall, nobody would be here asking for a variance. So the language in the ordinance is subject to a variance, in my opinion. So I think the hardship is the one that I'm wrestling with. I don't particularly have a hard time with the view portion.
Okay. This is a tough one. The project is a terrific project and would be a great one for downtown. I hear what my colleague, Mr. Warner, is saying about the Gold Dome. However, I think the effect of the visibility of the Gold Dome of this project would be so little that if you were to poll any 400 drivers going through town at any time, they wouldn't be able to tell you whether they saw the dome or not from that particular spot. I think it's de minimis. On the subject of the height, I think you can certainly make an argument that the topography of the lot and the way this is measured do create a physically induced hardship, but that gets you to 83 feet, not to 80. There is the fact that the higher portion is set back, which would make it very difficult to see from Main Street, which I think is a mitigating circumstance in terms of the effect of this, in terms of its effect on the intent of the ordinance and of the effect on neighboring properties. The objections that we heard concerning the design of the building and its impact on the neighbors is not something that we have any jurisdiction over. Obviously, those are considerations that anybody building in a dense downtown site will have to address, but that's not something the zoning board can address. I can easily vote, I think, in favor of an appeal concerning the Gold Dome. I think I could also vote for the hardship on the height, or the forgiveness on the height, because in this case, it would not have any impact on the streetscape, which is what I believe was the inspiration for the 80-foot height, not that there was some magic number in 80 feet. It has to do with the scale of the building. I don't think the building would appear out of scale, and for that reason, although I'm walking a fine line when I do it, I think I probably would vote in favor of a motion which I suspect is not going to be made to approve that variance as well. So, having delivered that little sermon, is anyone interested in making a motion? Let's start with a motion on the height.
I make a motion to deny the variance for the height on the basis that there is nothing unique about the property that renders the zoning ordinance treating it any differently than any other property on Main Street.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's moved. Second. Any discussion?
Just reiterate my statement that I do hope the city really does address this, because I think I'd love for them to be able to build higher.
Yes, and there's no question that we got a problem with the ordinance in terms of it's awfully long in the tooth in a lot of areas. So we have a motion. We have a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Nay. The vote is 3-2. The motion passes and the variance is denied. Now, as for the motion on the Gold Dome.
Is it moot? Do you still want us to vote on it?
I move to deny that variance as well.
On the grounds that there's no hardship?
On the same grounds that there's no specific hardship to this lot that would make it different than any other lot as far as the view goes.
Anyone care to second that motion?
Seconded.
Any discussion?
I'll just add that if they had a building that was 80 feet high that blocked a portion of the dome, I would be in favor of that variance. But I'm not in favor of this one.
Very good. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Nay.
Nay. The vote again is 3-2, and the motion carries. The variance is denied. That takes us to case 0125, 17 Rockland Street, RS Single Family Residential District. Christopher Aslan and Rachel Goldwasser are the owners. The applicant wishes to remove an existing attached garage and replace it with a new attached garage with living space on the second floor and requests a variance to Article 2841H, Table of Dimensional Regulations, to permit a building setback of 3 feet 8 inches, plus or minus, from the easterly property line where 15-foot setback is required. A previous variance request was approved in February 2020, but has expired due to the construction not having been started. Sir, do you swear to tell the truth? I do. May we have your name, please?
You may. Chris Aslin, 17 Concord Road.
What would you like us to know?
Well, thank you for having me at this late hour. As stated in the item, what we're looking to do is to replace an existing non-conforming garage to the side setback in substantially the same location. It would be the same footprint with the exception of a small stretch at the back of the current garage is an indent of 7 inches on the shed portion. So that would be filled out to be a straight line. It's a total of 5.25 square feet of additional encroachment into the side setback. In addition to replacing the garage, adding a second story living space which does not require any variance other than the side setback. The current garage is substandard. It's not quite wide enough to actually use with a car. You can pull a car in just barely, but you can't really open the doors and get out unless there's nothing in the garage. You can pull one side. So the intent of the project is in part to make the garage usable by expanding it into the current living space of the house, shrinking not expanding it into the side setback. We believe that the criteria for variance have been met in this case as set out in the application. This lot is unique in that it's a very narrow lot. It's only 74 feet wide. Two 15-foot side setbacks, that allows only 44 feet of buildable width, which is challenging to have a parking a garage with that kind of width. In addition, this is an existing non-conforming structure that's been there for many years. In terms of spirit of the ordinance, or an intent of the ordinance rather than the public interest, this would not change the essential character of the neighborhood. There's, as I said, replacing an existing structure in the same central location. It's consistent with other structures in the neighborhood that also have buildings that are near the sides and also second story additions. Substantial justice, we think, is also there's no real impact to the public by doing this. It's consistent existing things, and it won't diminish the value of the properties. It should, again, it's consistent with other properties in the neighborhood and should increase the values rather than diminish them. So with all that said, I guess I'll comment that the prior variance was issued for this. We were not able to get the construction underway because of the COVID pandemic and some other delays. So things lapsed. We're back to get a renewed variance at the board's pleasure. We would ask for that.
Is this design the same as was approved before?
It is. No change.
How wide is your garage?
How wide is
I can't read the fine print, sorry.
I don't think it actually says in here what the width of the garage is currently. I could look at the sketch. It's
12 or 17.
13, 9 and a quarter.
Yeah, it's not very wide.
Thank you.
You don't buy a Bentley.
So are you taking a part of the current garage and making that the breezeway and making the garage part narrower?
No, the other way around. So it's difficult to see on the site plan because it's the roof over, but the garage portion next to the garage is a mudroom. A better picture there. So as you can see, at the top is the garage in this diagram with the mudroom in between. That's, I believe, the proposed. Yes, that's the proposed layout. So the current mudroom is about 4 feet wider into the garage as it exists today. And so we're cutting the mudroom, making the mudroom narrower to allow the garage to expand inward and making the mudroom go deeper into the back.
Any other questions from the board? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there anyone here who wishes to be heard in favor of this appeal or in opposition to it? Any comments from code enforcement?
Not at this time.
With that, we'll declare the public testimony portion of the hearing closed. We have essentially a request to renew a variance that was granted a little over 2 years ago. and no changes have been made to the design. How does it sound to you, Nick?
Well, if we were persuaded to approve this a while ago and nothing has changed, I think I'm equally persuaded now.
No, we certainly can't admit to a mistake. And how does it look to you?
Approvable.
Ma'am?
I think given that they're replacing an existing garage and creating only an additional 5 additional square feet of encroachment, I think all the variance criteria are met. It won't alter the essential character of the neighborhood. It won't reduce surrounding property values. And the lot is certainly unique, both in its size and its existing development.
Mr. Winters?
Yeah, and it's a very narrow lot. In fact, the structure, which looks just to be an unreasonably sized structure, is already into both side setbacks. So, and it's one garage is very reasonable. For pretty much any neighborhood these days. So,
Would anyone care to make a motion? I agree with my colleague.
Move approval.
Second.
Is there a second? Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The vote is unanimous. The variance is granted. That brings us to the last scheduled item on our agenda this evening, which is case 012641 Bradley, which is an RN Neighborhood Residential District. David Leedy is the owner. Leidy is the owner. The applicant is requesting a variance to Article 2841H, table of dimensional regulations, to allow a shed to be 2 foot 10 inches from property line where 10 feet is required. You swear to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
Indeed I do, sir.
Tracy, are these pictures related to this?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you tonight and your attention. My name is David Leidy. I've owned 41 Bradley Street for 20 years. I bought it in 2004 from a last living Cassidy's, a Cassidy home, built in 1887. Joe Cassidy, he's dead. They said that he was the boy that was dropped from the table. He was a little off. Anyway, I am a man who identifies, an autistic man who identifies as a person of love. Therefore, I'm going to be a little bit different tonight. I want to inform you, first of all, I built a shed on my property. It's a unique little space. It's on the corner of Walker and Bradley Street. It's a Bradley Street address. But I've got more distance on the Walker side. I believe it's 40 by 99 feet, 1/10 of an acre, 1,300 square feet. The good news is my shed does not obscure the dome.
We are relieved to hear that.
Indeed. However, all of my neighbors have sheds and garages right up to the property line. I built an 8 by 12 shed. It's 8 feet tall plus a few more inches for the top plate in the front. Not counting the 2 by 6 rafters. I put it on cinder blocks. 2 by 6, 3/4 inch plywood on the floor. I set it back enough so that I can walk around the shed, and my drip line of the roof, which extends a foot in every direction, is on my property. I did not realize I was required to have a permit to build my shed. Apparently, there are codes that say that the setback must be 10 feet for the structure, which would put it smack dab in my driveway, which would eliminate parking. I talked to my neighbor on Walker Street, Mary Fields, and I said, Mary, I want to build a shed. She has a shed. She put it right up against the line, but I'm not here to talk bad about Mary, because I love Mary. She's a wonderful neighbor. I said, Mary, I want to build a shed in this corner next to the property line that we abut and share, which is here. This is where the shed is, right there. And she said, not a problem for her. Cool. I was married, but now I'm not. And because of that fact, I have moved back into this property, 41 Bradley Street, and built the shed along the way. I was living with my now ex-wife at 62 South Spring Street for about 15 years. I have moved back. I am not from here. I am not staying here. I intend to finish my Taj Mahal. I have paid for that property. My property taxes went from $1,200 to $4,500 in 20 years. Holy moly. However, I am going to keep that property after I leave and go home to New Mexico, and it's going to pay me after I go. I don't like gasoline in the house because I'm a licensed insurance adjuster. Gasoline can explode and make a fire and burn down your house. I have machines that use gasoline. Chainsaw, snowblower, lawnmower. Unfortunately, I had to keep my gasoline in my basement. I decided it would be prudent to build a shed to keep my stuff out of the house so it didn't burn down. I'm asking, please, to be able to complete the shed. I have two lovely windows facing south for natural light. I'm not going to put electricity in there. It's just an 8 by 12 shed. It is apparently 2 feet 10 inches at its closest point to the property line. My lot is not square, it's a trapezoid. And the line comes, as you can see, this way. So, I come before you tonight, and I do believe you saved the best for last. Ah, come on, man. That's harsh. I came before.
Let me ask you to
yes.
pause for 1 moment.
Yes,
I have
yes,
a question
yes,
for
yes,
code enforcement.
Yes, yes.
We have a 96 square foot building. Is that not an accessory structure?
It is an accessory structure.
Okay. So it requires what for setback?
It can be reduced down to 5 feet if less than 250 square feet of structure is within the setback. But it has to be more than 50 feet from the road.
Okay.
So it has to comply with the same setback as the main
If it can't be 50 feet from the road, right, which it can't from Walker Street.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So you said that the one neighbor had no problem with it, but it looks like there's a couple, actually 2 or even 3 abutters right near that shed. Did any of them have a problem with it?
Andy on Bradley Street, Andy Collins, doesn't live there on Bradley Street to the north of me, moving towards the Boys and Girls Club. Right here. This is Andy Collins' property. This is a duplex here. And I did not speak to him about my shed, but Mary, I did.
Oh, okay, so there's only 2 neighbors, I see.
Yes, I have 2 neighbors abutting my property here. And I did not speak to Andy about it. He does not live there, however. His garage here is almost, I mean, you can barely walk. You can't even walk along this line here. You can get behind here, and I've been back there pulling up the weed trees to jump up because I don't like the weed trees. Anyway, got it. My neighbors have I understand the idea of, grandfathered and, all the rules and whatnot. all I'm saying is that I'm asking permission to keep my shed where it is, where I put it, please, so I can park my machinery and gasoline and stuff while I'm still here, and then hopefully my tenants can also utilize it for their own needs. And I do believe that it would be a hardship for me to move it, number one, and it would be a hardship to put it in the middle of my driveway, number two. And I was here recently for the parking committee meeting with the mayor and my new friend, Karen McNamara, counselor from Ward number 4. And parking on Walker Street, the proposal was to eliminate parking on half the street. Ridiculous. I am blessed with parking. I don't want to lose any parking that I have.
All right, Mr. Light, I think we're getting a little far afield here.
All right. Apologies, sir.
I think we're good.
Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. Thank you.
Unless there's something else you absolutely need to know.
I don't think I have any more.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Is there anyone here who'd like to be heard in favor of this appeal? Or in opposition to it? Any comment from Concord? With that, we'll close the public testimony portion of the hearing. We have a request to grant a variance to allow a shed within, what was it, 2.5 feet?
2 feet 10 inches.
2 feet 10 inches of the side yard, or, yeah, I guess it's a side yard, isn't it? We heard testimony that the property is a corner lot, which creates a peculiar situation in terms of setbacks. The size of the lot is such that if the shed is put anywhere else, it obstructs necessary operations such as parking, circulation. Do I start? Let's see, who do we start with? Let me start. Yes, sure. Let's start with Mr. Wallner.
Yeah, in this neighborhood, it seems like folks have either a garage or a shed, and he would have neither if we denied this. And I think that's reasonable. The hardship is he has an unusually small lot. Allowing him to have a shed within the variance would mean putting it in a driveway, which would deny him parking. So I'm persuaded that he meets the hardship requirements and all the other requirements. I would move approval.
Inspector Morgan, how does it look
agree
to
with
you?
Nick.
Mr. Winters?
Very Shakespearean presentation, but I think he did get around to hitting the points we knew, which is it's a trapezoid lot. It's logical that he doesn't want to store machinery and gasoline too close to the house, so there's really no other logical place to put it. So I agree it's a reasonable use.
I agree with my colleagues.
Move approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Move to approve the last 2 minutes.
The vote was unanimous.
God bless you and thank you. God bless you and thank you.
Thank you for hanging in there for a long time.
Good job, well done. Okay, we had a motion to approve the minutes.
All minutes, yeah.
And the notices of decision?
Hmm?
And the notices of decision?
Sure. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.